Part 14. The Rebirth of Space, the Lucky Girl from a Farm Family. Author, He Would Fire Every. Chapter 131. Chapter 131 Chance Encounter. Song Kongyu waved his hand towards Li Cheng and said, "Cousin, don't worry about this matter. This little girl said she is willing to sell the dough in her hand. I want to see how much she will charge for a dough. She must open her mouth like a lion to see if I will cut her. Little girl, please make an offer quickly." Song Kongyu pursed his lips tightly and glared at Gu Huayu in disgust. "Cousin, my cousin rarely comes to Hongcheng. He spends all his efforts to take the two of them out for fun, but he doesn't want to meet anyone who is disgusting." I cursed in my heart, where did such a thing without eyes come from? Song Kongyu's disgusting and threatening words angered Gu Huayu. Gu Huayu sneered, looked down at the Monkey King in her hand, looked up at Song Kongyu, and said, "What a coincidence, I took a fancy to this Monkey King after shopping around for a day. At the moment, it is my favorite, and in my heart, it is priceless." Song Kongyu didn't wait for Gu Huayu to finish, and asked with a fierce look in his eyes, "So, you don't want to make an offer?" Gu Huayu met Song Kongyu's gaze and looked at him without fear. "What? If I don't make an offer, what can you do to me?" Song Kongyu raised his hand, wanting to hit Gu Huayu. Gu Huayu raised her head and took a step forward. She pointed at her face with her left finger and said, "Want to hit someone? Come on, hit them here. If you dare, swing down and try." Song Kongyu had never seen such a bold person before, and he began to have doubts in his heart. He thought, where did this person come from? Zion, no, Li Cheng hurriedly spoke to stop him. Song Kongyu waved his hand in the air twice and said to himself, "A good man does not fight with women. If you are a boy, I will not slap you today. If you ask for a price, do it quickly. Don't be shameless." Finally, Song Kongyu added angrily. Gu Huayu took a step back, not forgetting to give Song Kongyu a look. "You like it so much, and you want me to give in. It's not impossible." Song Kongyu thought that Gu Huayu was afraid, so he raised his head and said, "You should have been so sensible long ago. Tell me, how much money do you want?" Gu Huayu looked at Song Kongyu with a half smile, and said, "I told you, this Monkey King is my favorite. Zion, forget it, don't embarrass the little girl, let's go," Li Cheng advised from the side. Song Kongyu shook his head in disapproval and said, "It's rare that something can catch Xiao Tao's eyes. How can I disappoint Xiao Tao? Cousin, don't worry about it. Leave this matter to me. Little girl, how can you talk so much? How much money do you need? Just say it." Li Tao stood behind Li Cheng, playing with the folding fan and watching the show. Gu Huayu spread her hands with great reluctance and helplessness. "Actually, you can ask the old man to make another one for you." Song Kongyu waved his hand and said arrogantly, "No, we want this in your hand. In that case, you just have to pay this amount." "I won't let you pay anything less than this amount." Gu Huayu raised a finger as she spoke. Song Kongyu looked at Gu Huayu's finger, thinking it was 1 tael of silver, and deliberately asked, 10 taels of silver? It's no big deal, just say it, there is nothing embarrassing." With that said, Song Kongyu turned to his entourage and said, "Give the little girl 10 taels of silver." Gu Huayu shook her head and said, "No." Song Kongyu turned to look at Gu Huayu and asked with a sullen face, "No? Little girl, do you know how much you can buy with 10 taels of silver? For 10 taels of silver, I can buy the old man's stall." Gu Huayu raised her eyebrows and said, "I know, you can ask me to make another one for you, or you can buy someone else." Song Kongyu stared at Gu Huayu's little face, cursing in his heart, "What a ungrateful thing," and asked, "Tell me, how much money do you want? If you dare to speak like a lion, be careful, I will beat you up and teach you in public how to be a human being. Li Cheng originally wanted to persuade Song Kongyu to forget it, but seeing Gu Huayu's unruly and fearless appearance, he became more curious, so he kept silent and stood watching the show. Gu Huayu blew lightly at the Monkey King, looked up at Song Kongyu, then at the onlookers, and said disdainfully, "Teach me how to be a good person? Just you? When you see something you like, no matter whose it is, and you want to grab it without saying a word, you are worthy of saying be a good person. Sages also say that a gentleman does not take away what he likes. You." Gu Huayu didn't wait for Song Kongyu to finish speaking, and interrupted him with a loud voice, "What's wrong with me?" Then he turned to the onlookers and said, "Everyone here, please bear witness to the little girl. This man was bought by a little girl. But as soon as they came, they snatched it from the little girl without saying a word. Isn't it excessive? If they like it, they can ask me to pinch another one for them, right?" The onlookers nodded, "That's the truth." Taking advantage of their large numbers of people, they insisted on grabbing what I had, and even yelled at me to make an offer. Everyone, tell me, are they going too far? Gu Huayu sounded pitiful and aggrieved. "Hey, why are you like this, girl? You didn't say it yourself. Are you willing to sell the noodles in your hand?" Song Kongyu's face turned livid with anger. Gu Huayu glanced at Song Kongyu secretly and said fearfully, "Two of you, without saying a word, just stretched out your hands and grabbed them. What can I do?" In front of everyone, Song Kongyu was being held up and unable to get off the stage. He asked with a swollen voice, "Don't be nagging, we just like this handsome guy. Tell me, how much will it cost you?" Gu Huayu said, "If you insist on buying it, then pay 10,000 taels of silver." "How much?" Song Kongyu's eyes almost popped out of his head as he stared at Gu Huayu and asked. Gu Huayu stepped back and said cowardly, "If you think it's too expensive for 10,000 taels of silver, you don't have to buy it, and I won't be willing to sell it." The onlookers were stunned speechless by the asking price of 10,000 taels. After listening to Gu Huayu's words, they knew that she really didn't want to sell the object in her hand. Someone spoke up and said, "Master, I see that this little girl really likes this handsome guy, so don't embarrass her." Gu Huayu agreed gratefully, "I do like this guy, but if he really can afford 10,000 taels of silver, I can give him my love." Gu Huayu's voice was not loud, but everyone around her heard her clearly. After Gu Huayu finished speaking, she looked at Song Kongyu provocatively, "Of course, if Mr. Song can't afford the money, don't grab other interests." Song Kongyu was so angry that he pointed his folding fan at Gu Huayu. You. Gu Huayu raised her hand to block the folding fan and said in words that only the two of them could hear, "What are you? Since you don't have the courage to spend a lot of money, don't go out and do whatever you want. You." Gu Huayu ignored Song Kongyu, whose face was red with anger, and clasped her fists at the onlookers. "Thank you folks for being witnesses. It's okay. Let's disperse." Gu Huayu turned to Song Kongyu and waved the Monkey King in her hand. "Let's go." She turned and left. Song Kongyu has always been favored by the stars since he was so old. When did he ever feel so useless? Seeing Gu Huayu swinging her arms and leaving, Song Kongyu immediately raised his voice and said, "Wait a minute." Gu Huayu stopped and turned to look at Song Kongyu. Asked, "What?" "Zion, don't." Li Cheng shouted. "I'll buy it," Song Kongyu said. Gu Huayu spread her hands with a smile. "Okay, bring the money. Pay with one hand and deliver the goods with the other." Song Kongyu turned around and said to his entourage, "Go to the bank to get 10,000 taels of silver notes." The boy looked at Song Kongyu and then at Li Cheng, wondering what to do. If he really went to get the money, he would have to be beaten when he returned home. The servants like them might be beaten to death or sold. Li Cheng advised, "Know what you say, but don't act on your own accord. Cousin, don't stand in my way, I have to vent my anger today, Song Konggayu said. Li Cheng knew that Song Konggayu was stubborn and had lost face in public today, so he must be very angry at this time. Then he said, this matter arose out of thought. If you want to buy it, it is me who will buy it. I should pay for it? No, if Sai Wen likes it, I'll give it to him. Song Konggayu tried his best to suppress the anger in his heart and lowered his voice. Li Cheng wanted to break the tense atmosphere, smiled and shook his head, this Monkey King is too valuable, let me do it. Little girl, would you like to go to the bank with me to get the silver? Li Cheng turned to look at Gu Huayu and asked. Song Konggayu was stubborn in words, but he was honest in his heart. If he dares to go to the bank to withdraw 10,000 taels of silver, his father will definitely beat him until his is red when he returns home. Now that Li Cheng gave him the steps, he agreed half-heartedly and went back to give some gifts to his cousins. Although Song Konggayu was thinking this, he said, how can this be done? It is rare for my cousin to come back and forth to Hongcheng. How can I let my cousin spend money? Li Cheng patted Song Konggayu on the shoulder and said with a smile, come on, we are all brothers, no matter who gives the money, it is the same. Song Konggayu couldn't say any more polite words, that's all right. Just listen to your cousin. Li Cheng smiled and said, well, that's right. Little girl, let's go. After saying that, Li Cheng turned around and said to Gu Huayu. Gu Huayu looked Li Cheng up and down and said with a smile, this young master is very polite. If I sell it to you, I will give him 10 taels of silver. Li Cheng was stunned for a moment, then smiled and leaned over and said, I'd like to thank you, girl. After saying that, he took out 10 taels of silver from his wallet and handed it to Gu Huayu. You. Song Konggayu stared at Gu Huayu with wide eyes. Gu Huayu rolled her eyes at him and said while taking the money from Li Cheng, what are you doing? Read more books and learn more from this young master. Song Konggayu looked at Gu Huayu with a red face and was speechless to refute. Gu Huayu turned around and said to the stall owner, old man, I sold it for you at a good price, go on. Said, Gu Huayu threw the silver in her hand towards the stall owner. The stall owner hurriedly stretched out his hand to catch it, girl, this. Gu Huayu said with a smile, you are very good at holding the noodle. Take it. It's worth it. After speaking, Gu Huayu turned around and walked out of the crowd. Li Cheng looked at Gu Huayu's back, looked down at the Monkey King in his hand, shook his head and said, what an interesting little girl. Dr. Gu Huayu walked along the street for a while, and suddenly a man stopped in front of her. Gu Huayu raised her head to look at the person who came and asked in surprise, are you Yuan? Yuan bowed and said, that's right down there. Gu Huayu looked around and didn't see Lulu. She turned around and asked, why are you here? I came here with my master. He was drinking tea in the tea house opposite. My master asked, does Dr. Gu have time for a cup of tea? Yuan asked. Gu Huayu turned back and looked up at the tea house across the street, and saw Luzikin standing in front of the window, his plain white clothes particularly conspicuous in the sunlight. Seeing her looking over, Lulu waved to her. It seems that Mr. Lulu took a good look at the excitement just now. Gu Huayu said, lead the way. Yuan leaned forward and said, Dr. Gu, please come down with me. Gu Huayu followed Yuan to the tea house and went straight to the second floor. Yuan knocked on the door, then opened it and said, Dr. Gu, please. Gu Huayu walked into the house with her legs raised. Luzikin took 2 steps to greet her, cupped her hands in greeting and said, thank you, Dr. Gu, for the compliment. Dr. Gu, please take a seat. Gu Huayu returned the salute to Luzikin, walked to the table by the window and sat down. Yuan came in with tea and snacks, put them on the table, and then stepped out of the door. Luzikin put the teacup in front of Gu Huayu and asked, when did Dr. Gu come to Hongcheng? Gu Huayu took the teacup and said, "Thank you, I just arrived today." "Where is Mr. Lulu?" "He has been in Hongcheng." Lu Zikin shook his head, "I have been in Hongcheng for half a month. I haven't seen him for half a year, and Dr. Gu has grown a lot taller." Gu Huayu sipped her tea and said with a smile, "Well, I have grown a lot taller. Now is the period of body growth, and I have grown a lot taller in half a year." Lu Zikin reached out to refill Gu Huayu's tea and asked, "Why did you get involved with Li Tao?" Gu Huayu looked up at Lu Zikin and asked, "Do you know Li Tao, Mr. Lulu?" Lu Zikin nodded and responded, "Well, Li Tao and Li Cheng are brothers from the same mother, and their father Li Size is the minister of Dali Temple. The two brothers came to Hongcheng this time to attend the 80th birthday party of Mrs. Su, the grandmother of their mother Zheng Pailin." Gu Huayu asked thoughtfully, "Is this Li Tao very difficult to deal with?" Lu Zikin was surprised and pleased by Gu Huayu's sensitivity, secretly thinking, "She is such a smart girl." Lu Zikin looked up at Gu Huayu and said with a smile, "Li Tao is nicknamed the Demon King in the capital." Gu Huayu nodded clearly and said, "I see, no wonder you came up and grabbed what I had in my hand without saying a word." Lu Zikin pushed the snacks on the table in front of Gu Huayu and said, "Have a try." Gu Huayu was not polite, casually twisting a piece of sweet-scented Osman thus cake and gnawing on it. "Well, this is well done." Lu Zikin pursed his lips and smiled, "Eat more if you like it. You have made Li Tao look bad today, so be careful when traveling next time." Gu Huayu swallowed the sweet-scented Osman thus cake in her mouth and asked, "Is this person going to get revenge for his teeth?" "That's right, if he is not a villain, how can he get the title of Demon King?" "Thank you Mr. Lulu for reminding me, I know it well." Lu Zikin gave Gu Huayu more tea and asked, "Are you coming to Hongcheng alone? Are you here to visit relatives or do you have something to do?" Gu Huayu patted the snack Momo on her hand, picked up the teacup and sipped the tea, shook her head and said, "I came here with my third brother and Uncle Huang. We are not visiting relatives, but to explore the market for potato starch." Lu Zikin looked at Gu Huayu curiously and asked, "Oh? What is potato starch?" When Lu Zikin asked, Gu Huayu immediately became interested. He introduced Lu Zikin to various kinds of sweet potato starch, his eyes gleaming as he talked. End of this chapter. The Rebirth of Space, the Lucky Girl from a Farm Family. Author, He Would Fire Every. Chapter 132. Chapter 132 Cooperation. Lu Zikin looked at the energetic Gu Huayu, and was even more curious about the potato starch, and asked, "Does Dr. Gu have some with him?" Gu Huayu spread her hands and said, "I just went out for shopping and didn't bring any potato starch. If Mr. Lulu is willing to try it, I will go back to the inn to get some." Lu Zikin smiled and shook his head, "No need." When Gu Huayu saw Lu Zikin's rejection, she thought she didn't say it well enough, so she felt a little disappointed and said, "Oh." L.V. Zikin raised his voice and said, "Here comes someone." Yuan came in and said, "Sir, what are your orders?" Lu Zikin ordered, "Go to the inn to get some potato starch. By the way, which inn are you staying at?" Lu Zikin turned to look at Gu Huayu. Gu Huayu smiled and shook her head and said, "Third brother and Uncle Huang have gone out. There is no one in the inn, so I can't get it if I go there. Jinyi Inn is not far from here, I will come back as soon as I go." Lu Zikin smiled and said, "It seems that this is the only way. Let Yuan go with you." Gu Huayu waved her hands hurriedly and said, "No, no, why use two people when one person can do the job? It's a waste of manpower." "A waste of manpower," Lu Zikin looked at Gu Huayu and repeated. "Isn't it?" Gu Huayu asked with a smile. Lu Zikin smiled and said, "Okay, just listen to Dr. Gu." Gu Huayu said goodbye to Lu Zikin Fusion, turned around and left the house, happily running towards Jinyi Inn. "I was thinking that if I could get Lu Zikin through, the potato starch business could be brought to the capital. Even do it all over Daxing. Luzikin stood by the window, watching the jumping Gu Huayu walk away, the corners of his mouth turned up involuntarily. Aryuan stood on the edge, followed Luzikin's gaze, and said, "You can feel Dr. Gu's happiness from a distance." Luzikin turned around and glanced at Aryuan. Aryuan touched his nose, stepped back and stood by the side. Gu Huayu returned to the inn and saw that Gu Qinglin and shopkeeper Wang had not returned. She first went to the space to take out the prepared vermicelli, potato flour dumplings, potato flour cakes and hot and sour noodles. Then she turned around and went out, walked to the door, then turned back and left note before going out again. Gu Huayu returned to the tea house and said to Luzikin, "I want to borrow the kitchen." Luzikin looked at Aryuan, who said to Gu Hua, "Dr. Gu, please come down with me." Gu Huayu followed Aryuan to the kitchen. After getting the news, the shopkeeper hurried over, hunched over his waist and said with a smile, "Sir, apart from the stove, we only have simple oil, salt, soy sauce, and vinegar. The other small ones have to be prepared by others." Gu Huayu said with a smile, "Thank you, shopkeeper, I only want to borrow the pot and stove. I have brought everything else." The shopkeeper leaned forward and said, "That's good. I was thinking of asking the adults to make a list while I went to prepare it. Since the girl has brought everything, I can rest assured." After the shopkeeper left, Aryuan said, "Girl, I'm here to help you. Is there anything I need to do?" Gu Huayu looked up at Aryuan and asked, "Can you cook?" Aryuan looked around the kitchen, shook his head and said, "No." Gu Huayu then asked, "Then you know how to cook?" Aryuan touched his head in embarrassment, then shook his head in embarrassment. "Well, how do we start?" Gu Huayu asked. Aryuan pointed to the stove and said, "I'll make a fire down here." Gu Huayu smiled and nodded, "Okay, then you can help light the fire. By the way, do Mr. Lulu have any taboos?" Aryuan thought for a moment and shook his head, "Master's diet is very simple and there are no taboos." Gu Huayu nodded, and then asked, "Can Mr. Lulu eat spicy food?" Aryuan added a handful of firewood to the fire hall, raised his head and replied, "Yes, the Ye family's ancestral home is Hongcheng, and the taste is heavy, so the master's taste is also heavy. The Ye family is the master's maternal family." After finishing speaking, "Please explain." Gu Huayu was stunned. She knew that Ye Shangshu was Luzikin's maternal family, but she didn't know that the Ye family's ancestral home was in Hongcheng. "Oh, thank you Ruan, I understand." Gu Huayu first uses hot water to make the vermicelli, then steams the potato starch dumplings and potato starch cakes. After the vermicelli is well cooked, she starts making hot and sour noodles. Since the ingredients are already made, Gu Huayu made 2 small bowls of hot and sour noodles, a plate of potato starch dumplings, and a plate of potato starch rice cakes in less than 2/4 of an hour. Aryuan carried it on a tray and followed Gu Huayu back to the private room. When Luzikin saw Gu Huayu coming back, he stood up and said, "So soon?" Gu Huayu put the bowls and plates on the tray on the table and said, "All the ingredients have been prepared in advance, so it's quick. Master Lulu, try it." Gu Huayu picked up a pair of chopsticks and handed them to Luzikin. Luzikin took the chopsticks and looked at the dishes on the table, wondering which one to move first. Gu Huayu pointed at the potato starch dumpling and said, "Try this first, the crab roe dumpling. How does it taste?" Gu Huayu handed a pair of chopsticks to Aryuan and said, "Aryuan, you can try it too." Aryuan glanced at Luzikin, waved his hand and said, "No need. Try it and let me know how it tastes. Is there anything that needs improvement? You can also give me some advice," Gu Huayu insisted. "This." Aryuan looked at Luzikin and said in embarrassment. Luzikin looked at Ruan and said, "Let's eat together." Aryuan took the chopsticks from Gu Huayu's hand, bowed and thanked, "Thank you, Dr. Gu, thank you master." Luzikin picked up a potato dumpling and took a bite, his eyes suddenly lit up. The soft and waxy skin accompanied by the mellow filling had a great taste. Gu Huayu saw Luzikin's eyes and asked, "How is it? Is this taste acceptable?" Yuan just took a bite, holding the dumpling in his mouth and said wholeheartedly, "Okay, it's delicious. Dr. Gu, it's so delicious." Luzikin nodded and said, "Well, it tastes very good." When Luzikin finished eating one and went to pick up the second one, only 2 of the 6 dumplings were left on the plate. Luzikin raised his head and looked at Yuan. Yuan was about to pick up dumplings when he saw Luzikin looking at him and quickly retracted his hand. He smiled and said, "Master, you eat?" Gu Huayu pushed the potato cake forward and said, "Sixth master, try this potato cake, with assorted fillings." Luzikin nodded, picked one up and ate it. Gu Huayu said to Yuan, "Yuan, you should try it too." Yuan nodded repeatedly and said, "Okay." Speaking, Yuan put one into his mouth politely, and then praised without hesitation, "Well, it's very fragrant." If an eats very quickly, he will swallow something after entering his mouth 3 or 2 times, and then pick up the second one. Luzikin has never felt that this person was so annoying, he simply couldn't see him. Gu Huayu looked at Yuan happily, "Is it really delicious? Is the taste acceptable? Is there anything that needs to be improved?" Yuan nodded repeatedly and said while eating, "Dr. Gu, it's really delicious. The taste is so acceptable. I've been to countless restaurants and have never eaten anything so delicious." Gu Huayu was in a good mood and pushed the hot and sour noodles in front of Luzikin. "Sixth master, try this again." Okay. Luzikin lowered his head to take a bite, nodded repeatedly and said, "This is very flavorful and delicious." Gu Huayu only made 2 small bowls. Luzikin finished the noodles in a few times. He looked up and saw Yuan eating another bowl. He turned to look at Gu Huayu and asked, "Is this one gone?" Gu Huayu nodded and said, "No, I'm afraid you won't be used to it, so I didn't make much." "How does it taste? Is there anything that needs to be improved?" Luzikin thought for a while and said seriously, "Very good, but the amount is a bit small. It would be better if it were more." "How much did you bring to Hongcheng?" Gu Huayu replied, "The vermicelli and vermicelli each brought 10 shi, and we sold them to market towns along the way. When we arrived at Hongcheng, we only had 3 shi left for the vermicelli, and less than 2 shi for the vermicelli." Luzikin blurted out, "Give me all the rest." Gu Huayu smiled and said, "Sixth master likes it? I can just have some sent to my house. There is no need to help me like this." Luzikin said hurriedly, "Instead of helping you, I want to sell these in Chang'an restaurant. However, Dr. Gu has to leave the cooking recipe with him." Of course, Dr. Gu set a price for the recipe, and I bought it with my money. I have a condition that it can only be sold to my family. "Master Lu, are you sure? Can your family eat all the potato noodles? The output of Guangshuilan Villa this year is only around 500 shi. Next year, I plan to buy 2 more villages and double the output." Huayu asked directly. Luzikin thought for a while and said, "Sell it all to me this year. Next year I will still need 500 shi, but the cooking recipe can only be sold to my family." Gu Huayu responded readily, "Okay. Then let's draw up a contract, okay." Luzikin didn't expect Gu Huayu to be so rigorous in her work, so he couldn't help but take a deep look at her. He nodded in agreement, "Okay. Go and prepare some pen and ink." Luzikin turned around and said. Yuan bowed and stepped back, then came in with pen, ink, paper and inkstone. Luzikin looked at Gu Huayu and asked, "Should Dr. Gu draw up the contract or should I do it?" Gu Huayu thought for a while and said, "I'll do it." Luzikin also wanted to see the enigmatic Gu Huayu, so he politely said, "Dr. Gu, Please come this way. Gu Huayu walked to the table, thought for a while, lowered her head and wrote on the rice paper. Lu Zikin stood on the side, watching the small regular script with hairpins jumping out on the paper. His eyes were a little deeper, and the beautiful small regular script in this hand was very pleasing to the eye. Gu Huayu divides the contract into parties A and B according to the modern contract method. Gu Huayu kept writing, listing out their respective responsibilities and obligations as well as compensation after breach of contract. After spending more than half an hour, Gu Huayu wrote down all the thoughts, turned to Lu Zikin and said, "Master Lulu, see if this works. If there is anything that is not well thought out, let's change it." LV Zikin looked at it one by one, nodded and said, "It's very detailed, I think it's okay." Gu Huayu said, "Since Mr. Lulu thinks it is feasible, then I will make another copy, and then we will sign the contract and each will keep one copy." "Okay." "Okay," Lu Zikin nodded in agreement. Gu Huayu copied a copy and the two of them signed the contract. LV Zikin handed the contract to Ryuan and said, "Keep it." Gu Huayu put away the contract. Seeing that it was getting late, he said goodbye, "Thank you Master Lu for today. It's getting late, I should go back." Lu Zikin nodded and said, "Okay, I'll see Dr. Gu off." Gu Huayu said hurriedly, "No, no." Lu Zikin smiled and said, "Let's go, I'll send you to the door." Seeing Lu Zikin's insistence, Gu Huayu had no choice but to let him go. Gu Huayu walked forward, while Lu Zikin took a step behind and left the private room one after the other. Lu Zikin asked as he walked, "How long do you plan to stay in Hongcheng, Dr. Gu?" Gu Huayu thought for a while and said, "It hasn't been decided yet. It may take some time. I want to see if there is a suitable zhuangzi around Hongcheng." Lu Zikin was stunned for a moment, then asked, "Oh? Dr. Gu plans to buy a property here. Well, it's too troublesome to transport things from Shishan," Gu Huayu explained. Lu Zikin nodded and said, "Yes, then I'll ask someone to help you find out." Gu Huayu wanted to say no, but when she met Lu Zikin's gaze, she seemed unable to say no, so she thanked her, "Then I'll thank you first." Lu Zikin smiled and said, "It's just a small effort, so there's no need to thank you. Just give me a lower price later." Gu Huayu smiled and said, "That's easy to say." The two of them walked to the door of the tea house, and Lu Zikin said, "If Dr. Gu needs me for anything, you can go to the shopkeeper here, or go to the Chang'an restaurant next door to find the shopkeeper." Gu Huayu looked up at the plaque on the tea house, Ching Keju, and asked with a smile, "Does Mr. Lu like plums and bamboos?" Lu Zikin was stunned for a moment, and asked with slightly narrowed eyes, "How does Dr. Gu know?" Gu Huayu pointed to the plaque and said, "Kink, isn't it Plum Blossom? And the house in Shishan is named Miwen. And your clothes, the 2 times I saw you, are all made of bamboo with dark patterns." Lu Zikin burst into laughter and said, "Dr. Gu's observations are very detailed. He is not like a 10-year-old child. Dr. Gu's behavior has long been unlike that of a child." Gu Huayu smiled and said, "It seems I guessed it right." Lu Zikin nodded, "Well, you guessed it right. I like Mei's arrogance and I like Zhu's humility. Isn't it contradictory?" Gu Huayu smiled but said nothing. Lu Zikin glanced at Gu Huayu and asked, "Why is Dr. Gu laughing?" Gu Huayu replied, "I don't think the two are contradictory." Lu Zikin became interested and asked with a smile, "Tell me what you think." Gu Huayu took over the words, "The two have different meanings. Mei's proud spirit is to encourage herself not to be afraid of difficulties, to dare to fight, and to be self-disciplined. Bamboo's humility and open-mindedness are the way to deal with people and deal with things." Lu Zikin's face was calm, but his heart was surging. If the girl in front of him was not a head shorter than him, he would not have thought that she was only 10 years old. Dr. Gu's insights are profound. Gu Huayu said happily, "I made Mr. Lu laugh." It's getting late, I'm going back. Luzikin leaned forward and said, let's go, I'll see you off. Gu Huayu waved her hands hurriedly and said, no, no, the Jinyi Inn where I stay is right in front. As Gu Huayu spoke, she raised her finger and pointed to the inn not far away. Luzikin did not insist, but cupped his hands and said, then let's say goodbye. Dr. Gu, go slowly. If anything happens, Dr. Gu, come here to find me. Gu Hua said goodbye to her. Luzikin watched Gu Huayu walk away, then turned and went upstairs. When Gu Huayu returned to the inn, Gu Qinglin breathed a sigh of relief. Xiao, where have you been? Shopkeeper Wang and I went to the street to look for you twice. Uncle Huang went to look for you, but he hasn't come back yet. Gu Huayu said as she entered the room, didn't I leave you a note? A note? What note? I didn't see it, Gu Qinglin said. Gu Huayu looked around and found a note at the bottom of the cabinet. She bent down to pick it up and handed it to Gu Qinglin. That's the note. It was blown to the bottom of the cabinet by the wind. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Rebirth of Space, the lucky girl from a farm family. Author, he would fire every. Chapter 133. Chapter 133 Looking for Trouble. Gu Qinglin took the note, glanced at it, raised his head and asked, have you met Mr. Lulu from the British government? Mr. Lulu is also in Hongcheng. Gu Huayu nodded, yes, I met him at the King Jike tea house not far from here. Is Miss Xiao back? Shopkeeper Huang asked as he opened the door and entered the house. Gu Huayu stood up and replied, Uncle Huang, I'm back. Shopkeeper Huang wiped his sweat and said with a smile, just come back. Are you tired from shopping? I'll ask the waiter to bring the food. Okay, bring it up. After dinner, I have something to tell you, Gu Huayu responded. Seeing the joy on Gu Huayu's face, Gu Qinglin was moved and asked curiously, Xiao, what's the matter? Have you found another buyer? Gu Huayu raised her eyebrows and said, what do you think? Seeing Gu Huayu's expression, Gu Qinglin knew that 9 times out of 10 he had guessed correctly. He excitedly sat down next to Gu Huayu and said eagerly, that must be it. Tell me, what kind of buyer? A shop or a restaurant? Gu Huayu held her chin with her right hand and looked at Gu Qinglin with a smile. Gu Qinglin asked excitedly, it's a big restaurant? Right? Seeing that you are so happy, it must be a big deal. Wang Qin looked at Gu Huayu, waiting for her reply. Shopkeeper Huang returned to the house after ordering the waiter at the door and asked, what's the big deal? Gu Huayu sat up straight, took out the contract from her sleeve pocket and handed it to Gu Qinglin, take a look. Gu Qinglin looked at Gu Huayu, reached out and took the contract and looked down. Shopkeeper Huang and Wang Qin immediately came over, and the 3 heads gathered together. Gu Qinglin looked and read, and asked in disbelief, Xiao, did you sell all this batch of potato noodles? Gu Huayu knocked on the table with her hand, ask after you read it. Gu Qinglin nodded and said, oh, he lowered his head and looked again, and the 3 of them read the contract together. Shopkeepers Huang and Wang were fine. Gu Qinglin was so excited that he danced around in the room and shouted, Xiao, 500 stones per year, 1 stone is 120 kilograms, 2 5 10, 1 5 get 5, 500 stones is 60,000 caddies. 10 cents per caddy, which is 600 taels of silver. This is just the money for sweet potatoes. This alone is enough for our family's harvest in 30 years. We have harvested so much millet and corn this year. Oh my God, I'm getting rich, I'm getting rich. Grandpa would be so happy that he wouldn't be able to sleep if he found out. Shopkeeper Huang looked at Gu Qinglin, who was too excited to stop, and said with a smile, I don't know if your old man will be too happy to sleep. I think you will be too excited to sleep tonight. Gu Chenglin giggled at shopkeeper Huang. Uncle Huang is right, I'm so happy that I want to roar a few times. The waiter knocks on the door and delivers food. Gu Huayu smiled and said, I'm so happy. How much does it cost? I look at how happy you are. Hurry up and eat. Seeing the waiter come in, Gu Chenglin quickly stopped laughing and said, the food is here, eat and eat. After dinner, Gu Chenglin went back to his room first. Shopkeeper Huang said, girl, the house over there has been sorted out. We will live there tomorrow morning. Gu Huayu nodded, okay, Uncle Huang has arranged it. I plan to build a village in Hongcheng. Tomorrow you have someone go and inquire about it to see if there is anything suitable around Hongcheng. Shopkeeper Huang looked at Gu Huayu in surprise, girl, are you planning to buy a property here now? Gu Huayu nodded, yes, there is no shortage of things to buy. Now that you are here, let's do something. Shopkeeper Huang leaned over and said, okay, I'll send the girl to settle down on Jinpan Road tomorrow, and I'll go and investigate. Gu Huayu nodded, okay, thank you, Uncle Huang. Shopkeeper Huang said, girl, you are serious, this is what I should do. It is getting late, girl, take a rest early. Lu Ziqin worked very efficiently. At a quarter of the next day, Ruan went to Jinyi to look for Huayu. Dr. Gu, I went down to visit two villages. The two villages are not far apart, both in the south of the city. From the city, it takes about 3/4 of an hour to ride on horseback and more than half an hour by car. Zhuangzi is right next to the official road, which is very convenient. When is convenient for Dr. Gu, you can come and have a look. Shopkeeper Huang looked at Gu Huayu with confusion, and Gu Huayu said with a smile, Master Lulu said that he would ask someone to help me find out. I didn't expect that Master Lulu could do things so efficiently. Uncle Huang, just go and have a look. How's that? Shopkeeper Huang nodded clearly. Okay, I'll let Mr. Laoan lead the way. After Shopkeeper Huang and Ryuan left, Gu Chenglin asked in shock, Xiao, are you going to buy Zhuangzi? Gu Huayu nodded, well, it's too troublesome to transport things out from Xishan. It's better to buy some land near Hongcheng. But, will this cost a lot of money? Gu Chenglin asked worriedly. Gu Huayu smiled and replied, it costs some money. This is considered an investment. The money is well spent. I'm not saying it's not worth buying Zhuangzi, I'm worried that we don't have enough money, Gu Chenglin explained. Gu Huayu said comfortingly, third brother, don't worry about the money. I have my own arrangements. Let's clean up and move to the house on Jinpan Road later. Xiao also bought a house. The house in Hongcheng is very expensive, right? Where did you get the money? Gu Chenglin asked nonchalantly. Gu Huayu smiled and said, how can I have so much money? The house belongs to Uncle Huang, not me. We have to stay in Hongcheng for a while, and it is not convenient to stay in an inn. Uncle Huang said we should stay at home. After hearing this, Gu Chenglin breathed a sigh of relief, thank you, Uncle Huang. Shopkeeper Huang Sui Ruan visited Zhuangzi and immediately decided to buy Zhuangzi. The people from Yahang called the owner, and the group went to the Yamen to settle accounts and get the land deed. Ryuan returned to Yamanchen on Xianqi Road and reported the matter to Lu Ziqin. After hearing this, Lu Ziqin was silent for a long time and asked, Shopkeeper Huang went to see Zhuangzi? And then he immediately decided to buy it? Ryuan leaned forward and said, Master, yes, I accompanied them to the Yamen to transfer the property, and the land deed was transferred to Dr. Gu's name. By the way, I have an intuition that Shopkeeper Huang treats Dr. Gu very respectfully. Oh, tell me carefully. Lu Ziqin raised his head and looked at Ryuan. Ryuan thought for a while and said, I can't explain clearly. Shopkeeper Huang was very respectful when he listened to Dr. Gu. It was as if Dr. Gu was his master. Luzikin was silent for a moment and said, "Check shopkeeper Huang." Aryuan leaned forward and said, "I'll make arrangements now, little one." "Where's Dr. Gu? Do you want to check it out too?" Luzikin shook his head, "No need. You go and give Dr. Gu a message tomorrow morning and make an appointment with Dr. Gu to have lunch at Chang'an restaurant at noon the day after tomorrow." Aryuan lowered his hand and responded, "I understand, little one." "Oh, by the way, Dr. Gu no longer lives in Jinyi Inn. He lives in a house on Jinpan Road." Luzikin raised his head and looked at Aryuan, frowning slightly. "Jinpan Lu." Aryuan leaned forward and said, "Yes." Xiao Xiao and shopkeeper Huang came out of the yamen. On their way back, they happened to pass by Jinpan Road. Shopkeeper Huang said that he had bought that house many years ago. He has been doing business in Shishan for these years, and his house on Jinpan Road has always been in the sky. Now Dr. Gu wanted to stay in Hongcheng for a longer time. He thought that his home would be more comfortable than an inn, so he stayed here. The younger one took a look outside and saw that it was a third-in-command house. Luzikin said thoughtfully, "I understand, you can go down. Retreat if you like." Luzikin stood in front of the window and pondered. Shopkeeper Huang had a house in Hongcheng, but he went to the remote Shishan to do business. What is the reason for this? Is Gu Huayu really the daughter of Gu Dichang? Gu Huayu has never left Shangtai village before, but she knows medical skills, understands businessmen, is good at cooking, and knows Mei's arrogance and Zhu's humility. What is there that a little girl can't do? Luzikin murmured, "What a mysterious person." The next day, Gu Huayu didn't get up until midnight. After washing, shopkeeper Wang gave her a bun and praised her in the mirror, "The girl is so beautiful." Gu Huayu looked at herself in the mirror and asked, "Aunt Wang, have you seen my father and mother?" Wang Qin looked at Gu Huayu in the mirror and replied, "I have been in the Jiangnan area. I have met the head of the family, but not the wife." Gu Huayu turned to look at Wang Qin and asked, "Aunt Wang, do I look like my father?" Wang Qin nodded, "Well, the girl looks exactly like the head of the family." Gu Huayu raised her hand and touched her face, and said thoughtfully, "So, anyone who has seen my father can recognize me." Wang Qin looked at Gu Huayu alertly, "It should be." Gu Huayu continued, "There were almost no people who had seen my father in Shishan before. No one knew how I was. Now that I'm out, should I be more careful?" Wang Qin nodded, "What you said makes sense. You should be more careful about the Wanyan ship. From now on, if you go out, please wear a hat." Gu Huayu nodded, "Yes, I understand." Shopkeeper Wang smiled and said, "Are you hungry? Go have breakfast first." Gu Huayu stood up and shook her head, "No, I want to go outside and have breakfast outside." Shopkeeper Wang saw Gu Huayu jumping out and called out quickly, "Girl, put on another coat. It's windy today and it's a little cold outside." Gu Huayu walked to the door when a gust of wind blew, making her shiver. "Yo, it's so cold." Shopkeeper Wang heard Gu Huayu cry out, put down the coat in his hand, and picked up another jacket. "Girl, put this on." Gu Huayu obediently stretched out her hands to put them on, looked at the leaves in the yard that were blown up by the wind and danced in the air, and asked, "Where are Uncle Huang and the others? Do they have enough clothes?" Shopkeeper Wang laughed and said, "Young lady, you forgot that this yard is shopkeeper Wang's home." Gu Huayu laughed and said, "I really forgot." Wang Qin tied Gu Huayu's belt and said, "Early in the morning, the third master took King Zhu to the village. Shopkeeper Huang went to the tooth shop and said he wanted to buy some maids and come back to help him." Gu Huayu lowered her head, straightened her clothes, and said, "I understand. Aunt Wang, I'm going out." Shopkeeper Wang reminded, "Girl, please slow down. Do you want to accompany me?" Gu Huayu waved her hand without looking back, "No need. I don't know when I will come back. You don't have to wait for me to have lunch. Wang Qin raised her voice and said, I know, girl, be careful when you go out. Got it, Gu Huayu responded, jumped down from the steps, and climbed several steps in one step. Then he walked through the flower beds in the garden and ran straight to the door. Seeing Wang Qin behind her, she was sweating for her. Gu Huayu left the house and looked back at the blue brick wall and the wooden gate. They were simple and unpretentious. They were hidden in the corner of Hongcheng and were not conspicuous at all. I have to say that shopkeeper Huang has a very good vision. A gust of wind blew, Gu Huayu retracted her hands into her sleeves and walked east along Jinpan Road. Gu Huayu looked around while walking. She found a breakfast shop and went in. She ordered a crock pot soup with egg and meat pie, a sesame ball and a leek pie. Halfway through the meal, Gu Huayu suddenly felt that the light in front of her eyes was dimming. Gu Huayu raised her head and saw Li Tao standing in front of the table with his hands on his chest and looking at her. There were 3 people standing on the left and right, like Li Tao, with his hands on his chest and staring at her coldly. People eating breakfast in the shop stopped their chopsticks and looked over curiously. The store owner looked nervously at Li Tao and the others, then at Gu Huayu, and stammered, young master, can you tell me something? We are a small business. Li Tao stared at Gu Huayu, took out a piece of silver from his pocket, put it on the table, and said, take it away. The shopkeeper cautiously stepped forward to take away the silver, and then left quickly. Gu Huayu glanced at Li Tao, lowered her head and continued eating the leek pie as if no one else was watching, not paying attention to Li Tao and his party at all. Li Tao was irritated by Gu Huayu's ignoring attitude and slapped him on the table. Maybe he slapped it too hard and the pain caused him to throw away his hand. Just after 2 swings, Li Tao realized something was wrong. He reluctantly stopped his hand and yelled at Gu Huayu, smelly girl, aren't you afraid? Gu Huayu swallowed the cake in her mouth, lowered her head to take a sip of the soup, looked up at Li Tao, pointed at Li Tao and others, and said slowly, I'm afraid, there are a lot of you surrounding me, why aren't you afraid? Li Tao put one foot on the bench opposite Gu Huayu and asked, are you afraid that you can still eat? Are you afraid that you won't beg for mercy? Gu Huayu was amused by Li Tao, looked at him with a half smile, and asked, what? I beg for mercy, and you will let me go? Li Tao immediately shook his head and said, impossible. Gu Huayu spread her hands, this is over. I beg for mercy, but you won't let me go, so why should I beg for mercy? Li Tao was bypassed and asked, if you don't beg for mercy, how do you know I won't let you go? Gu Huayu looked at Li Tao and said, didn't you tell me just now? What's wrong? Are you planning to let me go? Li Tao blurted out, you're dreaming. Don't expect me to let you go. Gu Huayu continued to eat sesame balls, chewing and nodding, I know. But if you want to fight, you have to wait until I have eaten breakfast. Also, let's go out and find an open place to fight. Don't fight in this place, it affects other people's business. Li Tao looked around and said, I've already given you the money, so I'll hit it here. Gu Huayu shook her head and said disapprovingly, you only gave the store a silver coin, what about them? You didn't give any silver, right? Li Tao looked in the direction of Gu Huayu's finger and said in confusion, they are just breakfast eaters, and the shop does not belong to them. What does it have to do with them? Gu Huayu swallowed the last mouthful of sesame and said, why is it none of their business? If we fight here today, they will definitely be frightened, and maybe they will get sick from the fright. I wish you all a happy new year. End of this chapter. The Rebirth of Space, the lucky girl from a farm family. Author, he would fire every. Chapter 134. Chapter 134 Self-Cooked. Gu Huayu paused and said earnestly, this man is sick and has to spend money to seek medical advice. He can't work to make money. How much has he lost inside and outside? Moreover, look at them, all of them are strong and strong. Such people are the backbone of the family, and the whole family relies on them to earn money to support the family. If they get sick, what will happen to their families? You can fight here if you want, but give them some money first. Gu Huayu's soft voice softened Li Tao's heart. He was no longer as angry as when he entered. When he met Gu Huayu's sincere eyes again, he even felt a little flustered. He quickly looked away, looked at everyone, and asked in a deep voice, "This is what the girl said reasonable?" Everyone was still immersed in emotion, and Li Tao's question brought them back to their senses. Just now, a few people were envious of the store's free money, but the little girl handed the opportunity to them, nodded and said, "What you said makes sense." The man in grey clothes leaning against the wall took the opportunity to say, "The little one's family has an old mother who takes medicine all the time, and there are a lot of children with open mouths to eat. The whole family relies on the little one to earn money." Gu Huayu wanted to give the man in grey a thumbs up, put down her chopsticks, and sat on the edge to watch the show. She wanted to see how badass the famous devil in the capital was. Li Tao naturally didn't know what Gu Huayu was thinking. He had grown up well-fed, and had never known poverty. The reason why he is called the Demon King is just because he speaks outspokenly among the playboys. Now a group of poor people are looking at him eagerly. How can Li Tao resist? His sympathy suddenly soared, and he took out the money from his purse and distributed it to everyone. Everyone bowed to Li Tao and said, "Thank you, young master is such a good man, thank you very much, Mr. Li Tao. Young master Bodhisattva has a kind heart, and you will definitely become rich and powerful in the future. Young master is compassionate, Bodhisattva protects you." Gu Huayu was shocked when she saw that Li Tao was seriously distributing money to everyone, and at the same time she stopped teasing Li Tao. Li Tao grinned after being praised. He turned around and saw Gu Huayu opposite, and suddenly remembered why he came. Ji Qi raised his hands to the crowd and said, "Take the money and leave quickly. I have something important to do." The guys looked at Li Tao and then at Gu Huayu. Gu Huayu said with a smile, "Listen to Mr. Li and leave quickly." Everyone stood up one after another and said, "Okay, let's leave now." They moved out of the shop and looked back into the house. After the breakfast eaters left, Li Tao raised his eyebrows at Gu Huayu and said, "As you requested, I let them leave. Can we start?" Gu Huayu asked, "How do you want to fight? Are you going together? A group of big and thick men bullying a little girl like me? If this gets out, Mr. Li's face will not look good." As Gu Huayu spoke, she looked at the 6 people behind Li Tao. Li Tao looked back at the 6 retinues, then at the petite Gu Huayu, and asked, "Then what should I do? You made me so embarrassed that you didn't tell me what happened yesterday, and you even asked your brother to punish me by copying books. I tell you, this can't be done like this." Gu Huayu held her chin with her right hand, looked at Li Tao awkwardly, and said, "I don't know what to do. You are a boy and I am a girl. If you hit me, even if you win, you will win not strong, right? Also, you are older than me, and if you hit me, others will say that you are bullying the younger, don't you think so?" Speaking of what happened next, Gu Huayu raised her voice and asked the person behind Li Tao. The servants looked at Li Tao and lowered their heads. Gu Huayu raised her chin and said to Li Tao, "Look, your people are too embarrassed to answer." Li Tao waved his hand, "Forget it, good men don't fight with women. I'm a big man, so I won't argue with you anymore." Gu Huayu felt that the person in front of her was just a peacock, very arrogant. Since the other party gave in, she gave him the latter. Smiling, he clasped his fist towards Li Tao and said, "Thank you very much, Mr. Li Ergong. I will not forget the past grudges. I would like to thank you here, little lady." Li Tao glanced at Gu Huayu, hooked the bench with his foot, sat opposite Gu Huayu, and asked, What's your surname? How should I call you? Excuse me, the little girl's surname is Gu Huayu responded with a smile. Li Tao pointed to the plate in front of Gu Huayu and asked, how about this breakfast? Is it delicious? Gu Huayu was stunned for a moment, then smiled and said, second young master Li, you haven't used breakfast yet? I think it's okay. However, a noble young master like you may not be used to eating breakfast. Li Doubao glanced at Huayu and said, you are not me, why can't I get used to it? He turned to the store owner and shouted, give me a portion of the breakfast she just had. Seeing that the storm had passed, the store owner smiled and hunched his waist and responded, okay, sir, wait a moment. Li Tao turned to look at Gu Huayu and said, you are a good talker and you always talk the same thing. I will make you a friend. From now on, call me Li Tao. Don't call me eldest son or short son. It's ugly. Regardless of whether Gu Huayu wanted to do it or not, Li Tao announced his decision domineeringly. Gu Huayu looked at the self-righteous little kid in front of her, raised the corners of her mouth, and shouted obediently, okay, I will listen to you. The store delivered the meal and said, master, please use it slowly. Li Tao reached for the chopsticks and asked, Gu Huayu, do you want some more? Gu Huayu shook her head and said, use it slowly, I've finished it. With that said, Gu Huayu stood up and prepared to leave. Li Tao stopped what he was doing, looked up and stared at Gu Huayu and said, what are you going to do? Gu Huayu looked at Li Tao in confusion, go home, what's wrong? I haven't had breakfast, so I'm not allowed to leave. Stay and have breakfast with me, Li Tao said domineeringly. You. Before Gu Huayu could finish speaking, Li Tao interrupted her, what's wrong with me? We are friends, shouldn't you have breakfast with me? Gu Huayu looked at Li Tao who was pouting and staring at her, and thought to herself, have I provoked the arrogant and unreasonable Demon King? Gu Huayu sat down again and said, okay, we are friends now. I will have breakfast with you. You can eat quickly. Li Tao's eyebrows suddenly rose and he picked up the chopsticks again, well, I always have a good eye for people. You are a good friend. Gu Huayu, are you really not going to have any more? Gu Huayu shook her head, no, you eat what you have. Li Tao lowered his head to take a sip of the soup, raised his head and said to Gu Hua, well, I don't care about you, this soup is pretty good. He treated her like an old acquaintance. Gu Huayu held her chin in her hands and asked, how did you know I was having breakfast here? Didn't you send someone to keep an eye on me? Li Tao paused his hand, glanced at Gu Huayu guiltily, and said uncomfortably, what about that? You made me lose face yesterday, and I was punished by my brother when I went back. I was thinking about how to teach you a lesson. So, if I want to teach you a lesson, I naturally need to know where you are, right? So, I asked someone to inquire about your situation, and then I found you here. Alas, why did you stay at the inn yesterday? Are you not from Hongcheng? Li Tao finished speaking truthfully, and quickly changed the subject. As he spoke, he secretly peeked at Gu Huayu, and his voice became smaller and smaller. Gu Huayu looked at the cautious Li Tao, much like the Erha she once raised. When she was scolding him, he stared at her with innocent eyes and walked around her with hums and chirps. Is this man really the devil incarnation that Lu Ziqin calls him? Seeing that Gu Huayu was silent, Li Tao thought she was angry, tilted his head and asked softly, what? Are you angry? Gu Huayu looked at Li Tao with a half smile, and asked, you didn't teach me a lesson now, but you still treat me as a friend. Should I be grateful to you? Li Tao quickly put down his chopsticks and said with an apologetic smile, are you really angry? It was my fault for what happened before, okay. It's me who should be grateful to you. Gu Huayu tapped the table with her fingers and said, I'm not that stingy, I'll eat yours. Oh, Li Tao smiled and picked up the chopsticks again, lowering his head to eat the sesame balls. Gu Huayu said, "What happened yesterday was your fault, right? Why do you have the nerve to look for me? You still want to teach me a lesson?" Li Tao looked up at Gu Huayu and argued, "No one has ever treated me like you." Gu Huayu stared at Li Tao and said, "Say, keep talking. Why did you stop?" Li Tao lowered his head and continued eating, and said, "I'm hungry. I won't say anything anymore. Let's have breakfast." Gu Huayu took over the words, "If you don't tell me, let me tell you. Judging from the clothes of you and the people around you, you come from a very good family, and you are a member of a family that is either rich or noble. You have been served and fawned over by a lot of people since you were a child. As long as you like something, the people around you will rack their brains and try their best to give it to you. Right?" Li Tao thought for a while and said, "Well, that's about right." "What? Is there anything wrong with this?" "There's nothing wrong with them trying to please you. But it's your fault if you someone's face from me without my permission. Have you always been like this? When you see someone you like, you reach out and grab it without saying a word?" Gu Huayu asked Road. Li Tao nodded, "Yes, it's always been like this. Is there anything wrong? I took it, and it's not like I didn't give the money. I took it, and someone else paid for it, and the money was a lot. I don't call this robbery." "You don't have to pay for robbery. I'll pay for it, okay." He was very happy when he got the money and kept bowing to me to thank me. Gu Huayu finally understood. She didn't want to argue with this second-generation ancestor, so she waved her hands and said, "Come on, you are right. Eat your breakfast. I'm leaving." After speaking, Gu Huayu stood up. Li Tao put down his chopsticks and stood up, blocking Gu Huayu's path with a vigorous step. "Okay, why are you angry again? You agreed to have breakfast with me, and you have to keep your word, right?" Gu Huayu glared at Li Tao, "Get out of my way." Li Tao puffed out his chest and said, "No, you have to keep your word." "Okay, I know I was wrong. I won't take what you have in your hand next time, okay? No, I'll buy it for you if you like it, okay?" Li Tao's tone softened and he apologized to Gu Huayu with a low eyebrow. Gu Huayu breathed out and sat down again. "I can buy the things I like myself, I don't need you to buy them." Li Tao saw Gu Huayu sitting down and sat down with a smile. Okay, you buy it? You haven't replied to me yet? Are you not from Hongcheng?" Gu Huayu nodded, "Well, I'm from Xishan." Li Tao lowered his head to take a sip of soup, then raised his head and said, "I'm not from Hongcheng either. I'm from the capital." "Have you been to the capital?" "The capital is more fun than Hongcheng." "When are you going to the capital?" "I'll take you out to play." Gu Huayu said casually, "Then I'd like to thank you first." Li Tao waved his hand and said, "Thank you. There are so many delicious and fun things in the capital. You will definitely like it." "What are your plans today?" "There is a Tianxiang garden in the east of the city. Let's go and have a look, okay?" Gu Huayu thought that it would be more lively to go shopping alone, so she nodded and said, "Okay, you can eat quickly." Li Tao saw Gu Huayu respond, his face was full of smiles, he nodded repeatedly, said nothing, lowered his head and concentrated on eating breakfast. After Li Tao finished his breakfast, Gu Huayu stood up and said, "Let's go." The storekeeper nodded and bowed and sent Li Tao out of the store. Gu Huayu turned to look at Li Tao and asked, "How to get there?" Li Tao raised his chin and said, "Of course I went by car." Gu Huayu looked in the direction indicated by Li Tao and saw his retinue leading a carriage. "Miss Gu, please get in the car." The servant set up the footstool and bowed to Gu Huayu. "Get in the car," Li Tao said. Gu Huayu asked, "I'm taking the car, what about you?" Li Tao pointed to the horse next to him and said, "I'm riding a horse." What do you think? Invite me to ride with you. Gu Huayu rolled her eyes at him and said angrily, you are a man and I am a woman, do you understand? Li Tao looked at Gu Huayu with disdain and said, little girl Pianzi, the size of bean sprouts, there are men and women, wow. That's true. Gu Huayu raised her hand and said, believe it or not, I'll beat you up. Li Tao took a step back, raised his hand to cover his face, and said with a smile, believe me. Spare your life, hero. Gu Huayu smiled and put down her hand, turned around and boarded the car happily. Li Tao followed on horseback and asked, Gu Huayu, is Xishan far from Hongcheng? Is there anything good to eat or do there? Gu Huayu leaned against the car window, thought for a while, and said, Xishan is a bit far from Hongcheng. It takes a few days to drive. Is it fun? Compared with Hongcheng, it is definitely not as much as Hongcheng, but Xishan Mountain has good water. Good people, I like them very much. Li Tao glanced at the car window and said dissatisfied, what you said is nonsense. Looking at the world, where are the mountains, rivers, and good people better? Gu Huayu glanced at Li Tao, then you still ask. After Gu Huayu finished speaking, she closed the curtain on the right side, sat on the left side, and leaned against the car window to look at the scenery outside. Li Tao rode to the left and said with a smile, what? Are you angry again? Gu Huayu looked up at him but did not answer his words. Seeing that Gu Huayu ignored him, Li Tao cleared his throat twice, and then said, Gu Xiao, can you stop being angry? Talk to me, okay. Gu Huayu looked up at Li Tao and asked, what did you call me? This guy is really familiar with himself. Gu Xiao. What's wrong? Isn't it more affectionate than calling her Gu Huayu? Li Tao looked at Gu Huayu and asked. Without waiting for Gu Huayu to reply, Li Tao said to himself, we are friends, and I will call you Gu Xiao from now on. You can call me Li Tao, or you can call me Li Xiao Tao. Gu Xiao, how boring it is to sit alone and bored. Let's talk, whatever we say is fine. How about you tell me anecdotes about Xishan? Li Tao is like a chatterbox, and he keeps yelling. End of this chapter. The Rebirth of Space, the lucky girl from a farm family. Author, he would fire every. Chapter 135. Chapter 135 Expectation. Gu Huayu regretted going out with this guy. Xiao, why are you staring at my face? Is there something on my face? Li Tao asked while touching his face. Gu Huayu said seriously, we are not familiar with each other, please call me Gu Huayu. Li Tao wrinkled his nose and pouted, aren't we familiar? Oh, Xiao, you are not a friend enough. Do you know? How many people in the capital want to make friends with me? Gu Huayu stared at Li Tao without saying a word. Deed, I call you Gu Huayu, don't look at me like this. Li Tao lowered his head in frustration, then raised his head and asked, what's fun in Xishan? Gu Huayu thought she could be quiet for a while, but when she saw Li Tao smiling at her thiefly, Gu Huayu knew that she was overthinking. Gu Huayu shook her head, I was weak when I was a child, and I spent all my time at home recuperating from illness. I haven't been to any places, and I haven't experienced anything interesting. Tell me about interesting things about the capital. Li Tao said with raised eyebrows, okay. There is nothing in the capital that I don't know about. Let me tell you, the most interesting place in the capital is the elephant shed in the south of the city. There are various performances every day. At Ye Mansion on Xianxi Road, Lu Zikan put down the book he was holding and asked, did Dr. Gu and Li Tao go to Tianxiang Garden? Yuan leaned forward and responded, yes, in the morning. Second young Master Li led his followers to look for Dr. Gu aggressively, and blocked Dr. Gu in a breakfast shop. Kinglan was still worried that Dr. Gu would suffer a loss, but unexpectedly, Dr. Gu convinced the second young Master Li with a few words. The second young Master Li also regarded Dr. Gu as a friend and made an appointment to visit Tianxiang Garden. Lu Zikan asked, "What did Dr. Gu say to Li Tao? Retell what you heard." Lu Zikan stood up, walked to the window, stood quietly for a while, turned around and asked, "Qing Lan is back?" Ar Yuan shook his head, "No, I asked Kinglan to follow me to Tianxiang Garden." Lv Zikan nodded, and then asked, "Has the post been sent?" Ar Yuan lowered his hand and responded, "Sent it over. Shopkeeper Huang is not here. It was a woman named Wang who took the post. The woman walks very lightly. She has been tested a little and is a kung fu expert." Lv Zikan asked, "Is Rugjuan not back yet?" "Master, the young one is back." Rugjuan opened the door and came in. Lu Zikan turned to look at Rugjuan and asked, "Have you found it?" Rugjuan leaned forward and said, "Dr. Gu and shopkeeper Huang set out for Hongcheng, and shopkeeper Shen followed them. The difference is that Dr. Gu and shopkeeper Huang traveled by water, while shopkeeper Shen took the land route." Lu Zikan nodded, "Where's shopkeeper Shen? Let him come to see me." Rugjuan leaned forward and said, "Young man, go and bring shopkeeper Shen here." After a while, shopkeeper Shen from Chang'an restaurant followed Rugjuan into the study and bowed to Lu Zikan. Lu Zikan said, "Tell me about the situation in Xishan." Shopkeeper Shen reported everything that happened in Xishan in the past 6 months to Lu Zikan. After hearing this, Lu Zikan asked, "How is County Magistrate Chen doing now?" Shopkeeper Shen leaned forward and said, "County Magistrate Chen injured his legs. The day after the incident, Magistrate Chen's wife Zheng left for Hongcheng. Now Magistrate Chen is also in Hongcheng. I have asked people to inquire about it. I am afraid that County Magistrate Chen will not be able to stand up in the future." Lu Zikan frowned slightly and then asked, "Both County Magistrate Chen's concubine's hands and Magistrate Chen's legs were done by shopkeeper Wang's people?" Shopkeeper Shen nodded, "Master, yes." Ar Yuan blurted out and asked, "Why did shopkeeper Huang do this? Did he have a problem with County Magistrate Chen?" Rugjuan took the words and said, "Shopkeeper Huang has been in Xishan for many years. If he had any trouble with County Magistrate Chen, he should have taken action long ago." Lu Zikan leaned against the window and thought for a moment, then said quietly, "Shopkeeper Huang is not simple." Shopkeeper Shen leaned forward and said, "A few days ago, Zhu Mingdao, the life chaser of Long Shadow Guard, arrived in Xishan and entered Huangji." Lu Zikan suddenly turned around and stared at shopkeeper Shen, and asked in surprise, "Are you sure?" Shopkeeper Shen nodded firmly, "I'm sure. Xishan is too small and too remote, and there are very few outsiders coming in and out." "Zhu Mingdao, the life chaser? Went to Huangji? So, shopkeeper Huang is from Lunjiang Guard?" Ar Yuan looked at Lu Zikan and asked. Lv Zikan nodded and said quietly, "If shopkeeper Huang is from Lunjiang Guard, he would come to rescue me when I was assassinated in Xishan. That would make sense." Ar Yuan suddenly said, "So, shopkeeper Huang has recognized us a long time ago." Lu Zikan shook his head, "It's hard to say." Ar Yuan nodded, "After all, it had been 10 years, and I was still a little boy at that time." Ar Yuan turned to look at shopkeeper Shen and asked, "That woman named Wang who came to Hongcheng with shopkeeper Huang, is she the shopkeeper of the jasmine powder shop?" Shopkeeper Shen nodded and said, "Yes, Wang Qin followed the life chaser to Xishan. After the life chaser left, Wang Qin, Lu Guang, Ruan Wu, and Mi Chen stayed behind. Wang Qin has been the shopkeeper of Hangzhouji embroidery shop for many years. He is known as Jin Yushang and is very famous among the wealthy circles in Hangzhou. With her embroidery skills, she is really good at embroidery." Ar Yuan asked doubtfully, "Since shopkeeper Huang is a member of the Lunjiang Guard, why did he avoid it in Xishan? He avoided it for 10 years. Also, does Commander Huang know? Does the Emperor know?" Lu Zikan shook his head, 10 years ago, the Long Shadow Guard was severely damaged. Hwasu took office at the critical moment and shouldered the heavy responsibility of the Long Shadow Guard. However, not all the people below listened to him. It is said that Hwasu killed many people in order to eliminate dissidents. Little people. Shopkeeper Hwang should have escaped at that time. That's it, Yuan nodded. So, after the incident 10 years ago, the Long Shadow Guards were divided into two factions, those who listen to Hwasu and those who don't. Yuan pointed out as he spoke. Rugjuan shook his head. To be precise, there should be three factions, and there are also some who are neutral and wait and see. Luzikin nodded. Well, that should be the case. Once, I heard Wenda chatting with the fifth master. When talking about this matter, Wenda said that his father was still looking for the Dragon Mark Order. I asked curiously, what is the Dragon Mark Order? The fifth master said that it was the token of the leader of the Long Shadow Guard. It was said that the ancestors of the Hwa family asked the master to make it specially. There is only one in the world. The disciples of the Long Shadow Guard saw the order as if they were meeting the master of the family. Rugjuan asked curiously, so, Commander Hwa doesn't have the Dragon Mark Order now? Luzikin nodded and said, yes, Hwasu did not have the order of the family head. He took over as Lunjing Guard based on the Emperor's imperial edict and the tacit approval of the old family head of Lunjing Guard. Shopkeeper Shen understood and said, although the Long Shadow Guards are used by the royal family, to be honest, the Long Shadow Guards can be regarded as a Jianghu section. Their management has more rules in the Jianghu. The Emperor's imperial edict may not be respected among Jianghu people. It works. Yuan said excitedly, yeah, that should be the reason. So Hwasu has been searching hard for the Dragon Pattern Order for these years and has never given up. Hwafu's old house on Yongchun Road was burned to ruins, and Hwasu ordered people to turn it over several times. The most recent one was last winter. Rugjuan nodded and said, well, at that time Ruhi asked if they were looking for something. It turned out to be the Dragon Mark Order. Luzikin said, Shopkeeper Hwang has a life-saving grace with me. As long as we know about this, we should keep our mouths shut and don't talk outside. A few people nodded. Don't worry, I will bear this in mind. Luzikin continued, Drgu, please withdraw Kinglan. Sixth Master. There was a knock on the door. Come in. Luzikin looked up at the door. Jing came in and reported, Sixth Master, Mr. Li has handed over a message and invites you to come to Qingkeju for a small gathering tomorrow at 6 o'clock. Luzikin said, I have something to do tomorrow at noon. I will write a post and change the time to noon. You can send it to Mr. Li. When Jin took the post and went out, Luzikin said, you go down first. Everybody bowed and stepped back. Luzikin picked up the pen again and wrote the words Gu Huayu, Gu Di Chang, Huang Zhengui, Wang Qin, Long Yingwei and other words on the rice paper. Luzikin looked at the names on the paper and wrote down their respective information next to the names. Connect them one by one with lines and note the connection between them. Gu Huayu was born in the capital 10 years ago, Long Yingwei was severely damaged 10 years ago, and shopkeeper Huang took refuge in Shishan for 10 years. A thought flashed through Luzikin's mind, could it be? Luzikin stood at the table for a long time, going from shock to calmness, then to joy, and then to hope. If Gu Huayu is really Uncle Hua's child, Luzikin is looking forward to arriving early tomorrow. Gu Huayu and Li Tao finished visiting Tianxiang Garden, and Li Tao pestered her to have lunch with her again, and did not return to Jinpan Road until the second quarter of the day. The girl is back. Shopkeeper Wang was in the yard instructing the maid and mother-in-law. When he saw Gu Huayu coming back, he bowed his knees to the girl. The maidservant and the mother-in-law followed and bent their knees to greet him. Hello girl. Gu Huayu was stunned for a moment, then nodded to everyone, hello. Shopkeeper Wang turned around and ordered, you go ahead and do your work. I'll call you later if I need anything. The maid and her mother-in-law bent their knees and stepped back. "Have you eaten, girl?" Wang Qin asked with a smile. Gu Huayu nodded. "I've eaten." "Aunt Wang, is Uncle Huang back?" Wang Qin replied, "I'm back. I'm in the study now." "Girl, our Yuan, who is with Mr. Lulu, sent me a post this morning." Speaking, Wang Qin handed over the post. Gu Huayu took the post from Wang Qin's hand, opened it and read it, and asked, "Is King Zhu back?" "Let him go to Chang'an restaurant to reply to the post." "King Zhu hasn't come back yet, King Yu is here, talking to shopkeeper Huang in the study." "Miss Xiao is back. Is Hong Cheng fun?" Shopkeeper Huang came out of the study and asked in a loud voice. Gu Huayu nodded, "Yes, it's quite fun. I went to Tianxiang Garden today." Shopkeeper Huang stepped aside and introduced to Gu Huayu, "Girl, this is King Yu." King Yu bowed to Gu Huayu and said, "Hello, girl." Gu Huayu returned the greeting to Qing Yu, "Hello. It's windy outside, come inside to talk," shopkeeper Huang greeted. A few people entered the study room and after chatting for a while, shopkeeper Huang said, "Girl, King Yu wants to come back and stay with the girl to work, is that okay?" Gu Huayu responded happily, "Okay, Uncle Huang, just make arrangements." Just in time, the girl is going to Chang'an restaurant to reply to Master Lu Liu's message. "Qing Yu should go there," Wang Qin said with a smile. Shopkeeper Huang asked, "Girl, do you want to reply to Mr. Lu Liu's post?" Gu Huayu nodded, "Yes, our Yuan from Mr. Lu Liu's side sent a message this morning, asking me to meet at Chang'an restaurant tomorrow to discuss anything. There is a Chang'an restaurant on Yongsheng Road and Xiangshan Road in Hongcheng." "Where does the girl want to send the post?" Qing Yu asked. Gu Huayu thought for a while and said, "Send it to this house on Yongsheng Road." King Yu bowed and said, "Okay, I understand." Gu Huayu folded the post and handed it to King Yu. "Good work. You're serious, girl, I'm so honored to be able to do something for you," Qing Yu bowed and responded. After Qing Yu left, shopkeeper Huang said to Gu Huayu, "Girl, I bought 4 maids, 4 women and a cook today. They are all dead contracts. I will meet you first and choose 2 to serve around me." Gu Huayu thought for a while and said, "Okay, let's meet." Shopkeeper Wang stood up and said, "I'll go and summon them to the yard first." When Gu Huayu and shopkeeper Huang went out, the maids and women were already lined up in the yard. Gu Huayu pointed to the left head and asked, "How old are you? What's your name?" The girl bent her knees and responded, "Go back to my wife, I am 13 this year. I will wait for you to give me a name." Seeing that the girl was well behaved and her eyes were calm, Gu Huayu nodded with satisfaction, "Then let's call her Hungzia." Hungzia bent her knees and thanked her, "Thank you so much, my dear girl." Gu Huayu nodded, her eyes falling on the girl in green and red, "What about you? How old are you? Where are you from? What's your name?" The girl in green bowed her knees and said, "Girl, I am also 13. I have been in Yaxing for as long as I can remember and have been resold several times. I don't know where I am from. I will wait for the girl to give me my name." Gu Huayu glanced at the girl in Xingyi sympathetically, sighing secretly that it was unfortunate for a girl to be born in this era. "If you do good things in the future, I'll call you Chao Yang." Chao Yang bowed his knees and thanked, "Thank you, girl." Gu Huayu turned to look at Wang Qin, "Aunt Wang, Hungzia and Chao Yang follow me. You can make arrangements for the rest." Wang Qin nodded and told Hungzia and Chao Yang to follow Gu Huayu. Back to his residence, Gu Huayu said, "I like peace and quiet. I usually like to be alone. You can't disturb me. You can't come in and out of my house at will. Do you understand?" The two of them bent their knees in response. Hungzia hesitated for a moment, then bent her knees and asked, "Girl, what about the servant cleaning? When is convenient?" Gu Huayu thought for a while and said, I go into the house to clean every day. Qiao Yang bent his knees and asked, what about the girl's daily life? Don't you need a servant to serve her? Gu Huayu pointed to the room next to her and said, the bathroom and clothes storage room are over here. You can just wait here. Hengxia and Qiao Yang bent their knees in response, I understand. Gu Huayu waved her hand, you go and do your work, I'm going to take a lunch break. Qiao Yang waited for Gu Huayu to enter the room, then turned to look at Hengxia, tell me, is the girl a bit difficult to get along with? Hengxia turned around and went to the bathroom, don't make blind guesses. The girl said she likes to be quiet and doesn't like to be disturbed by others. Let's not bother the girl and just do her own thing. Qiao Yang nodded and said, that's right, we just do our own thing seriously, and we can't care about anything else. I hope it can last longer this time, I'm so afraid of being sold out again. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Rebirth of Space, the lucky girl from a farm family. Author, he would fire every. Chapter 136. Chapter 136 touched. Hengxia sighed, how can we control this? All we can do is do our best to do things well. As for the rest, we can only leave it to fate. Qiao Yang sighed, you are right. What should we do now? Hengxia said, first clean the small courtyard inside and outside, and then decorate it. It's a pity that it's not spring, otherwise, you can plant some flowers and plants. The girl will definitely like it. Qiao Yang rolled up his sleeves and began to clean, let's arrange it first, and then start planting after winter. By spring, the garden will be full of fragrant flowers. Gu Huayu leaned on the soft couch, listening to the conversation between the two, with the corners of her mouth raised. Twist the green wind in your hand, turn around and enter the space. Yanran, are you there? Gu Huayu just entered the trading space, and anxious Atong was reflected in the illusion. I'm here, Atong, when will you come? Gu Huayu replied immediately. Yanran, you're here, that's great, please help me. Okay, Atong seemed to have seen a savior. What's the matter? Speak slowly, don't be in a hurry, Gu Huayu hurriedly comforted her. Give me an anesthetic in addition, get some more of the cartilage powder you purified for me last time, I'll trade it with you for the medicinal materials. Okay, Atong said. Okay, don't worry, I'll get it for you right now, Gu Huayu responded while opening the item trading interface and collecting the cartilage that Atong wanted to purify. Atong said gratefully, thank you Yanran. He was injured, very seriously. Yanran, I'm so scared. If he can't survive, I won't survive either. Gu Huayu immediately understood why Atong was anxious. From what Atong said, he and Atong were childhood sweethearts who were in love with each other and had long recognized each other. The two should have gotten married long ago, but in the past 2 years, wars have been raging around Daki, and that man has to take command. Gu Huayu put the anesthetic into the transaction interface, and also put in a solid yuan pill given by Lao Qin. He said, Atong, in addition to the anesthetic, there is also a Gu Yuan Dan. Let your general take the medicine first, and then you can treat him. The cartilage powder has been purified. I will put it in the grid and you can pick it up yourself. Thank you Yanran, I'm going to work, let's talk another day. Go quickly. After Atong left, Gu Huayu took the cartilage and walked into the laboratory. When she came out to leave, you little girl, my teacher has just arrived and you are leaving, Qin Feng said dissatisfied. Gu Huayu turned around and looked at Qin Feng in the fantasy mirror, and asked with a smile, what's wrong? Are you greedy again? Qin Feng put a box of elixirs on the trading grid, you stinky girl, my teacher, all you want in your heart is to eat? Is your box of elixirs going to be used up soon? Gu Huayu opened the elixir, took a look at it, and said, "Thank you. This box has a lot more than the last one." Qin Feng said, "I'm going into seclusion, so I'll prepare more for you. Some days I won't be able to see you as my teacher. Do you want to be my teacher? Go, 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 who has time to think about you?" "I'm busy," Gu Huayu replied casually. "You little heartless little girl, I think of you all the time as a teacher in vain," Qin Feng said aggrievedly. Gu Huayu curled her lips and said, "You have become a spirit, and you are still acting like a coquettish girl. You are not embarrassed?" Qin Feng raised his voice and said, "Smelly girl, believe it or not, I will beat you up." Gu Huayu raised her head and said, "If you have the ability, come and see if you can beat me." Qin Feng gritted his teeth angrily, "When you return to Dongshan, I will settle the score with you again. Let's go." "Wait," Gu Huayu shouted when she saw that Qin Feng was really angry. "What's the matter?" Qin Feng stopped and asked. Gu Huayu raised her eyebrows and asked gently, "Are you really angry? If you have something to say, it's okay, I'm leaving," Qin Feng said coldly. "Well, I wanted to make some food for you. Since you are busy, let's do it next time," Gu Huayu said unhurriedly. As soon as Qin Feng heard about the food, he immediately said, "Who said I'm busy? I'm not busy. What do you want to do? Hurry up." Gu Huayu raised the corners of her mouth. "Wait." After Gu Huayu finished speaking, she turned around and prepared to go to the kitchen. "You stinky girl, talk to me, don't leave me alone," Qin Feng said in a loud voice. Gu Huayu said angrily, "Then do you want to eat it?" "Eat? Why don't you eat? You can cook it over here, don't leave master." "You also know that master doesn't like to be alone," Qin Feng said with a smile. "You old man, what's wrong today?" "You're so pretentious," Gu Huayu replied. "Smelly girl, do you really don't remember anything?" Qin Feng asked. Gu Huayu asked while busy, "What should I remember?" Qin Feng sighed and said, "Oh, forget it, let's not mention it. What delicious food can you make for me?" Gu Huayu buried her head in her work and replied without raising her head, "Braised prawns, crab roe buns, grilled lamb chops, assorted casserole." "Where is Dongshan? Why should I go back?" "Dongshan is Dongshan, why do you want to go back, stinky girl? What you are asking is, that is your home. Alas, you are a person who can't remember anything. Why should I compete with you?" Qin Feng's voice dropped from high to low, and at the end he let out a long breath. Gu Huayu stopped what she was doing, raised her head and asked, "Are you sure you recognized the wrong person? What if I'm not the person you said?" Qin Feng sneered and said, "You recognized the wrong person? You didn't even ask, are there any people in the three realms who I recognized by mistake?" Gu Huayu couldn't see the old man's stinky look, so she buried her head and continued working. "I don't want to know about the three realms or Dongshan. You can leave first. Once it is done, I will put it in the same place. I've made you unhappy again, my teacher? Why are you still such a bad-tempered person?" Qin Feng said. Gu Huayu stopped what she was doing. Okay, I'll go first, okay." After Qin Feng left, Gu Huayu became depressed, finished the meal, turned around and left the space. After dinner, Gu Huayu took a rest early. At night, Gu Huayu had that long dream again. In the dream, she seemed to be running among the green mountains, and there seemed to be someone following her. She couldn't see the other person's face clearly. She wanted to speak, but she tried her best, the words were stuck in her throat and she couldn't make a sound. In desperation, Gu Huayu opened her eyes, and she woke up. Gu Huayu stood up, lit the lamp, poured herself a glass of water and drank it. Gu Huayu turned to look at the hourglass on the cupboard. Jo Mo, it was still early before dawn. Gu Huayu lay back down again, thinking about her previous dream. This was the first time she had such a dream since she came back. Could it be Dongshan? Gu Huayu shook her head and didn't want to think too much. She reached out to move the lamp closer, picked up the book on the bedside and started reading. "Miss, are you awake?" Hengxia's voice sounded outside the door. Gu Huayu raised her voice and replied, "Wake up, I'll read a book. Don't worry about me, you can sleep on your own." "Yes, miss, if you have anything to do, please call me your slave." "I will stay outside," Hengxia responded. Gu Huayu responded and lowered her head to read. It wasn't until the sleepiness returned that Gu Huayu put down the book and lay down to rest. Gu Huayu woke up again, it was already Chen time. After washing and changing clothes, Chao Yang put the rice porridge on the table. "Miss, Aunt Wang said that the lady has a banquet at noon. It will be neither early nor late. Let the lady drink some porridge to cushion the meal." "Okay. Hengxia, get ready and follow me out in a moment." Gu Huayu picked up the bowl and lowered her head to eat. Hengxia bends her knees to respond. Gu Huayu got off the car at the door of the restaurant, and Yuan came over to greet him and said, "Dr. Gu is here. Mr. Lu is waiting for Dr. Gu upstairs. Please come down with me." Gu Huayu nodded, followed Yuan with Hengxia, and went straight to the second floor. At the corner of the stairs, I met Li Cheng, who was going downstairs. Yuan leaned forward and said, "Master Cheng. How's it going? Is Lulu here?" Li Cheng was stunned for a moment, then asked. Yuan leaned forward and said, "Go back to Mr. Cheng, Mr. Lu is here." Li Cheng turned around and walked upstairs. As he walked, he asked, "Which hall is Lulu in? I'll go look for him." Yuan opened his mouth and saw that Li Cheng was already walking up, so he had to say, "Peony Hall." "I know," Li Cheng responded without looking back. Yuan leaned over and said to Gu Hua, "Please, Dr. Gu." Gu Huayu nodded, "Let's go." "You don't have to call me Dr. Gu, just call me by my name." Gu Huayu didn't want Li Cheng to know that she had medical skills, so she gave a subtle hint. Yuan immediately understood the meaning of Gu Hua's words. He leaned forward and said, "How can this happen? Just like shopkeeper Huang and the others, how about calling Dr. Gu and Xiao, miss?" Gu Huayu nodded, "Okay." Yuan led Gu Huayu to the door of Peony Hall, raised his hand and knocked on the door. "Master Lu, Miss Xiao is here. Please come in." Lu Zikin's voice came from the room. Yuan opened the door, leaned forward and said, "Miss Xiao, please come inside." Gu Huayu walked into the room. Li Cheng looked at Gu Huayu in surprise, then at Lu Zikin, and asked, "Do you know each other?" Lu Zikin nodded, "Gu Huayu is my sister." "Huayu, this is Li Cheng, the eldest son of Li Sais, the young minister of Dali Temple in the capital." "Miss Gu Huayu." Speaking, Lu Zikin introduced each other to the two of them. Gu Huayu was stunned. She did not expect that Lu Zikin would introduce herself in this way. Looking at Lu Zikin in surprise. Lu Zikin also happened to look at her, their eyes met, and Lu Zikin nodded slightly towards her with a smile in his eyes. Gu Huayu thought of what happened yesterday and understood that Lu Zikin wanted to protect her. My heart moved slightly, and a warm current flowed through me. Although she didn't need his protection, she was still grateful for Lu Zikin's kindness, so she bowed to Lu Zikin and thanked him. Li Cheng smiled and cupped his hands towards Gu Huayu. "Miss Gu, we meet again." Gu Huayu returned the greeting, "Mr. Li, nice to meet you." Lu Zikin pretended to be surprised and asked, "Do you know him?" Li Cheng said with a smile, "I was lucky enough to meet Miss Gu when I was shopping yesterday." Seeing that Li Cheng had no intention of elaborating, Lu Zikin didn't ask any more questions. He smiled and greeted, "It's fate that we are familiar with each other once, so let's sit down and talk." So the three of them took their seats, respectively. Yuan stepped forward to offer tea, and then retreated to the side. Gu Huayu was just a child in Li Cheng's eyes. He only regarded her as Lu Zikin's relative in Hongcheng and did not take her seriously. He looked at Lu Zikin and said bluntly, "When will Zikin return to Beijing?" Lu Zikin pushed the teacup in front of Li Cheng and replied calmly, "There's no rush, as long as I can get back to the capital before the end of the year. What about you? When will you return?" "I am leaving the day after tomorrow, and I wanted to ask you if you would like to return to Beijing together," Li Cheng said with a smile. Lu Zikin leaned forward and said, "Thank you. I have filial piety. There will be many inconveniences along the way. Let's get together again when we return to Beijing." "That's okay, then let's go back to Beijing and get together," Li Cheng said. Master Chow and the others are here," Li Cheng's boy came in to report. Li Cheng nodded, "I understand." After the waiter left, Li Cheng stood up and said, "Goodbye, you guys chat slowly, I have an appointment with someone, so I'll take my leave first." Gu Huayu stood up and saw him off. Li Cheng cupped his hands towards Gu Huayu and said, "Miss Gu, see you later." Gu Huayu said to Fu Shen, "See you soon." The two of them walked Li Cheng to the door, and then went back after Li Cheng left. LV Zikin gave way and said, "Dr. Gu, please take a seat." Gu Huayu thanked her and sat back to her previous position. "I have never opened a medical clinic, and I don't practice medicine on weekdays. Master Lulu does not need to respect me as a doctor. We are considered acquaintances. From now on, Master Lulu can just call me Xiao," Gu Huayu said with a smile. While pouring tea for Gu Huayu, Lu Zikin said, "Okay, I will call you Xiao from now on. You have saved my life, so you don't have to respect me as Master Lulu. My name is Lu Zikin, and my courtesy name is Qinjian." Having said this, Lu Zikin paused and looked at Gu Huayu, "You are much younger than me, so I can be your brother. From now on, how about you call me Brother Zikin or Brother Qinjian?" Lu Zikin pushed the teacup in front of Gu Huayu, looked at her and asked. Gu Huayu smiled and nodded, and said in a good-natured voice, "Then Brother Qinjian." "Hello Brother Qinjian, please take good care of me in the future." The corners of Lu Zikin's mouth turned upward. "Okay, brother will protect you from now on. Try this year's melon slices to see if they suit your taste." Gu Huayu picked up the teacup and took a sip, nodded and said, "Yes, it is emerald green and shiny, the aroma is pure, and the taste is fresh and mellow. It is a good tea." Lu Zikin's eyes darkened a bit. The girl in front of him was like a puzzler. How much did she understand? Asked, "Xiao understands tea." Gu Huayu smiled and shook her head, "I can't say I understand, I just like the taste." Lu Zikin refilled Gu Huayu's tea and said, "As long as you like it, there are 2 boxes here. You can take 1 box back later." Gu Huayu did not delay, smiled and leaned forward and said, "Then I'll thank you first." Lu Zikin said casually, "There is no need to thank me from now on. If you want to thank me, I will thank you too." Gu Huayu knew that Lu Zikin was referring to life-saving matters, and suddenly thought of something, and asked, "Has your old illness been cured?" Lu Zikin paused and looked up at Gu Huayu in surprise. "Last time, you saw that I had an old illness." Gu Huayu nodded, "Well, it's not an old disease. To be precise, you have been poisoned by a chronic disease. This poison is 7-star begonia, also known as the king of poisons in the world. The person who poisoned you has treated it so that the poison does not take effect immediately, but is slowly released in your body. The poison should have been in your body for more than 10 years, and symptoms will only appear in these 2 years. Once symptoms appear, your chance of survival is almost zero." "Then how did you help me detoxify?" Lu Zikin asked. Gu Huayu said with a smile, "You are also lucky. The only resurrecting pill I have is for you to come across it. It is an advantage for you." Lu Zikin cupped his hands and bowed and said, "Thank you so much for the little words. Gu Huayu waved her hands and asked, "Just now did you tell Mr. Li that you were filial?" Lu Zikin nodded and said in a depressed mood, "Yes, my grandfather has passed away. I will send him back to his hometown." End of this chapter. The Rebirth of Space, the lucky girl from a farm family. Author, he would fire every. Chapter 137. Chapter 137 Knowing the Identity. Gu Huayu was stunned for a moment. It turned out that Ye Shangshu passed away and said, "Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't know." Lu Zikin raised his head and looked at Gu Huayu. "It's okay." Facing Lu Zikin's gaze, Gu Huayu could see the sadness in his eyes. She felt a little intolerable, but she was so stupid that she didn't know how to comfort him. Lu Zikin held the teacup in his hand. "When I first received the letter, if I had asked Dr. Gu to go to the capital with me, maybe my grandfather would not have died." Lu Zikin's trust surprised Gu Huayu, but people cannot be resurrected, so she didn't want him to blame himself too much, so she said, "First of all, I have never met Ye Shangshu, so I don't know what disease he is suffering from. Secondly, even if I see Ye Shangshu and know what disease he is suffering from, I am not sure I can cure him. After all, I am just a human being, not a god. Furthermore, life, old age, illness and death are all determined. Brother Qinjian needs to be more open-minded." Lu Zikin sighed slightly. "Yes, life and death have their own destiny." Lu Zikin leaned back on the chair, his eyes wandering to nowhere, and continued, "The night I rushed back to the capital from Shishan, my grandfather left. For half a year, I always feel that my grandfather is still alive. As long as I turn around, I can meet him." When Lu Zikin said this, he stopped and took a lonely sip of tea from his cup. Gu Huayu played with the teacup and didn't speak, just listened to him quietly. In Gu Huayu's view, what Lu Zikin needs at this time is a listener. Lu Zikin put down the teacup and continued, "I am a descendant of the British Duke's house. Growing up, I lived in Ye's house much more than in the Duke's house. My father was stationed at the border all year round. My grandfather pitied me for not being accompanied by my father. He often took me with him and played wildly with me, playing hide and seek, rolling hoops, and spinning tops. One time, my grandfather was playing a spinning top with me and got distracted. Because of this, my grandmother still talked about it for a long time." An image of the old man playing wildly in the garden with his children flashed through Gu Huayu's mind, and she said, "Your grandfather dotes on you very much." Lv Zikin looked at Gu Huayu, nodded and said, "Well, my grandfather dotes on me very much. In addition to playing with me, he also taught me how to read and write. He was my first teacher. I have 2 cousins. They are very afraid of my grandfather. They are always cautious in front of my grandfather. I really don't understand why my grandfather is an amiable person. Why are they afraid of him? That shouldn't be called fear, it should be called awe. Ye Shangshu is so outstanding. Your cousin and the others are in awe of him." Gu Huayu enlightened. "Do you know that my grandfather is Ye Shangshu?" Lu Zikin asked. Gu Huayu was stunned for a moment, regretting that she had spoken too quickly. He replied truthfully, "Yes, Uncle Huang told me." Lu Zikin nodded. "Oh. Sir, it's time to eat, shall we serve now?" Yuan came in and asked. "Come on," Lu Zikin nodded in response. After a while, the waiters came into the house one after another and put the food on the table. Yuan and Hengxia came in to wait on Lu Zikin and Gu Huayu to clean their hands. Lu Zikin was stunned when he saw Hengxia. Gu Huayu explained, "This is the girl next to me, named Hengxia. Hengxia is here to pay tribute to Mr. Lulu." Hengxia bent her knees towards Lu Zikin and said, "How are you, Master 6? Lu Zikin nodded slightly. After washing his hands, Lu Zikin waved his hand, "You guys, please step back." Yuan led everyone back out. Gu Huayu smiled and said, Brother Kinjian doesn't need them to serve you. Luzikin looked at Gu Huayu, shook his head and said, I don't like to pretend to be someone else when it comes to food, clothing, shelter, and transportation. I don't want others to do what I can do. Xiao needs someone to take care of him. Gu Huayu smiled and shook her head, no need, I'm used to doing my own thing. Luzikin filled half a bowl of soup for Gu Huayu. It has been windy and very cold in Hongcheng for the past 2 days. Drink the soup first to warm yourself up. Gu Huayu smiled and thanked her. During the dinner, Luzikin took care of Gu Hua and talked a lot, while he ate very little. After dinner, Luzikin asked Yuan to call Dangtu over, and Gu Huayu taught Dangtu how to make potato noodles. Afterwards, the two of them sat aside and drank tea for a while, and Gu Huayu stood up to say goodbye. Luzikin stood up to see him off and said, Xiao, I will return to Beijing tomorrow. Keep the jade pendant I asked Yuan to give you last time. If you come to the capital in the future, take the jade pendant to Chang'an restaurant or to Duke Qingqiu. Just look for me. Gu Huayu stopped and asked in surprise, Brother Kinjian will return to Beijing tomorrow. Luzikin nodded and said, well, when we set off, my grandmother fell ill. My uncle, eldest cousin, and second cousin all helped my grandfather's coffin back to Hongcheng. There were no men in the family, so I was a little worried and had to go back early. Yuan will stay and take care of my uncle and the others. If you need anything in Hongcheng, come here to find Yuan and he will take care of things for you. Gu Huayu was moved by Luzikin's sincerity and thanked her, thank you, Brother Kinjian, I'll note it down. Silly girl, I told you not to say thank you, Luzikin said seriously. Gu Huayu smiled and said, okay, I won't say anything more. Luzikin put his hands behind his back and stepped aside, let's go, I'll take you back. Gu Huayu wanted to say no, but seeing Luzikin's insistence, she swallowed her words. Luzikin sent Gu Huayu to Jinpan Road, watched Gu Huayu enter the house, and then turned and left. As soon as Gu Huayu entered the courtyard, Qingyu came over and said, girl, the boy next to Mr. Li came here to deliver the post. Gu Huayu took the post, read it, and said, go back and tell me that I have something to do and can't go to the banquet. Second, young Master Li invited the girl to a banquet at the Zheng mansion, shopkeeper Huang asked while standing on the corridor. Gu Huayu replied calmly, yes. Shopkeeper Huang smiled and said, tomorrow, the most lively place in Hongcheng will be the birthday banquet of the old lady of the Zheng mansion. It is said that all the dignitaries in Hongcheng will go to congratulate the old lady on her birthday. The scene will be very grand. The girl will not go, and it's not a pity. Gu Huayu shook her head, the top priority is that we should focus on our careers and not join in the fun. Shopkeeper Huang said, the girl is right. Since Mr. Li has posted the message, it's not a good idea for us to pretend we don't know. I have prepared a gift for the girl. If the girl doesn't go, should I ask Qingyu to send a gift over? Gu Huayu shook her head, I only met Mr. Li once, and I am not familiar with him, so there is no need to give gifts. Besides, in their eyes, I am just a little girl, and there is no need to be so sensible among children. Shopkeeper Huang lowered his hands and responded, yes, I'm overthinking it. As she spoke, Gu Huayu walked to the pavilion and sat down. She looked at the chrysanthemums arranged at random in the courtyard and asked, did Uncle Huang arrange them? Huh, shopkeeper Huang followed Gu Huayu's gaze and immediately understood what Gu Huayu meant. He nodded with a smile and said, well, I learned it from the master of the house before. The master of the house is good at taking care of flowers and plants. The front and backyards of Hua Mansion are planted, full of flowers and plants. Gu Huayu nodded thoughtfully, yes, Shangshu passed away. Gu Huayu suddenly changed the topic, making shopkeeper Huang stunned again, then nodded and said, I heard about it too. Master Lulu came to Hongcheng to deliver Ye Shangshu's coffin back. Alas, Time flies so fast, and in a blink of an eye, Ye Shangshu has passed away. I remember that when the old head of the family was in Beijing, he often got together with Ye Shangshu, Grand Scholar Huang, the father-in-law of Prince Lu, to drink tea and chat. At that time, Ye Shangshu often took Ye Cheng with him, and the old head of the family took the head of the house with him. I and Susing followed the head of the house. The adults did not shy away from the children when they were talking. The head of the house liked to listen to the conversation between Ye Shangshu and Huang Daxi. No matter what they said, the head of the house listened with great interest and sat there for an hour or two. Thinking about that time, it seems like it was only yesterday, but in the blink of an eye, everything has changed. Shopkeeper Huang sighed lightly. Gu Huayu was very surprised and asked, "Grandfather and Ye Shangshu have a good personal relationship?" Shopkeeper Huang nodded repeatedly, "Yes, very good." Gu Huayu suddenly thought of Lu Zikin's attitude towards her today, and her brows furrowed involuntarily. "What's wrong with the girl?" Shopkeeper Huang noticed the change in Gu Huayu and asked. Gu Huayu said about Lu Zikin's abnormality today, "I didn't think much about it at the time. I just thought he was protecting me in front of Mr. Li because of what happened yesterday. Now that I think about it, I'm afraid he knows my identity." Shopkeeper Huang suddenly became nervous. "Girl." Gu Huayu waved her hand, "Don't be nervous, go by your intuition, he has no ill intentions towards me." "Oh," Shopkeeper Huang responded on the surface, but he was still a little uneasy in his heart. Gu Huayu thought for a while and said, "Go and find out where Ye Shangshu's grave is. Let's go and pay homage another day." Shopkeeper Huang leaned forward and said, "Okay, I understand." Gu Huayu stood up and said, "Brother Qinjian is going back to Beijing tomorrow. I have a box of health elixirs here. Please help me deliver them to Brother Qinjian. I hope it will be helpful to his grandmother." Shopkeeper Huang then leaned forward and said, "Okay." Gu Huayu took out the elixir and handed it to Shopkeeper Huang, saying, "You go and hand it over to Brother Qinjian in person. I'll write down the usage and dosage on the note, so Mrs. Jean can take it on time." Shopkeeper Huang took the elixir and said, "Okay, I'll go right away." Shopkeeper Huang took 2 steps back and turned around and walked out of the yard. Lu Zikin had just returned to Ye Mansion to put on his clothes when a servant came in and said, "Master 6, there is a man named Huang Xiao who wants to see you." Lu Zikin frowned slightly and said, "Take the person to the living room of the study." The servants retreated, and after a while, Shopkeeper Huang was brought over. Lu Zikin raised his hand and the servants retreated. After the two parties greeted each other, Shopkeeper Huang handed over the box. "Sixth Master, this is the health elixir that Dr. Gu asked me to send you. Dr. Gu said that he hopes this elixir will be helpful to the old lady's health." Lu Zikin took the box and opened it casually. There was a piece of letter paper in the box, and 10 wax sealed were neatly placed under the letter paper. Lu Zikin unfolded the letter paper, and the usage, dosage, and precautions were written in small regular script. Shopkeeper Huang leaned forward and said, "Dr. Gu said that she has already written down the usage and dosage on the paper. Mrs. Jean just needs to take it according to the instructions." Lu Zikin put away the note and said, "Thank you, Shopkeeper Huang." "Shopkeeper Huang, please have a seat." Shopkeeper Huang leaned forward and said, "Thank you, Master 6. I have something else to do, so I'll take my leave." Before Shopkeeper Huang turned around, Lu Zikin said, "I don't know why Shopkeeper Huang stays with Xiao. I just want to remind Shopkeeper Huang that he should be more careful in his future actions. Long Shadow Guard has been looking for your whereabouts these years. If Long Shadow Guard knows your whereabouts, they will definitely kill you. If possible, please ask Shopkeeper Huang to stay away from Xiao to prevent Xiao from suffering the disaster of Chiu." Huang Xiao was not surprised that Lu Zikin could see through his identity. He replied calmly, "Thank you, Mr. Lu, I know what I am doing." Lu Zikan asked, Xiao knows your identity. Shopkeeper Huang thought for a while and nodded, Dr. Gu knows. Lu Zikan frowned, and then asked, you obey Xiao's orders, is Xiao really Uncle Hua's? Shopkeeper Wang's heart skipped a beat. It turned out that Lu Zikan had not confirmed the girl's identity. He was just testing himself. Shopkeeper Huang was annoyed that he was too rash, and a trace of panic flashed in his eyes. Lu Zikan firmed up his thoughts from Shopkeeper Wang's panicked look, I'm right, right? Not long ago, Mr. Zhu, the life chaser, showed up in Shishan. Was it because of this? Shopkeeper Huang leaned forward and said, Sixth Master, this is Long Yingwei's family matter. Shopkeeper Huang acquiesced, and Lu Zikan let out a breath and said, although this matter is Long Yingwei's family matter, Xiao is my savior, how can I ignore her safety? Goodbye, she is Uncle Hua's daughter, and can you stand by and watch? Shopkeeper Huang leaned back and said, don't worry, Mr. Six, if anything happens, I will do my best to protect the little master. Master, Lu Zikan asked. Shopkeeper Huang cupped his hands and bowed, Master Six, I'm taking my leave. Seeing that Shopkeeper Huang didn't want to say anything, Lu Zikan had no choice but to hold his hands and say, goodbye. I'll leave Yuan behind. If necessary, I'll go to Chang'an restaurant to find Yuan. If something happens in Shishan, I'll go to Chang'an restaurant to find Shopkeeper Shen. Shopkeeper Huang thanked him again, took 2 steps back, turned around and left in a hurry. Shopkeeper Huang walked to the door of Ye Mansion and saw Ye Cheng getting out of the car. He quickly stepped aside and waited for Ye Cheng to leave before leaving quickly. Back on Jinpan Road, Shopkeeper Huang reported back to Gu Huayu, girl, the elixir was given to Mr. Lulu himself. Mr. Lulu found out my identity and guessed the girl's identity. Gu Huayu nodded, it's okay, just know it if you know it. We have no conflict of interest with him. Even if he knows, he won't embarrass us. Shopkeeper Huang said worriedly, but Mr. Lulu is a popular person in front of the emperor. Gu Huayu smiled and said, Uncle Huang, don't worry too much. There will be a way for the car to reach the mountain. There is nothing to worry about. In Hua Mansion in the capital, Hua Su knocked on the table several times, looked at Deng Jiao opposite and said, the old guy hasn't left Hangzhou for many years. He won't go to Jiangnan East Road for no reason. Have you asked someone to check it? As long as the old guy has stayed there, everyone who has come into contact with me must be checked one by one. Do you understand? Deng Jiao leaned forward and said, Master, Zhu Gongfeng left Fuang, and our people followed him all the way. According to the news that came back, there is nothing suspicious about Zhu Gongfeng. It's just. Hua Su asked, just what? Deng Jiao replied, Zhu Gongfeng did not enter Giwan Pavilion anywhere, but only chose ordinary inns or local specialty shops to rest. Hua Su turned his gaze to Chen Song sideways and asked, what do you think about this? Chen Song let go and pinched his chin, and said thoughtfully, don't be careless, but don't be too nervous. Maybe Mr. Zhu is going out for fun. End of this chapter. The Rebirth of Space, the lucky girl from a farm family. Author, he would fire every. Chapter 138. Chapter 138 Call the shots. Hua Su leaned back and found a comfortable position for himself. He looked at Chen Song sideways and said, I hope so. If I don't find the dragon mark order, my heart will not be at peace. Chen Song nodded, I understand your concerns, sir. Here's the order, wherever Mr. Zhu has been, a thorough investigation will be carried out. Chen Song turned to Deng Jiao and ordered. Chen Song had just finished speaking, but before Deng Jiao could reply, a servant hurriedly came in and said, Your Excellency, Chen Liang would like to see you. Hua Su and Chen Song looked at each other quickly and said, let him in. The servants exit. After a while, Chen Liang came in, first bowed his hands to Huasu, and then bowed his hands to Chen Song and Deng Jiao. Huasu looked at the dusty Chen Liang and asked, "Have you just returned to Beijing?" Chen Liang leaned forward and said, "Sir, I have just returned to the capital. I will come to see you before I can change my clothes. Please forgive me." After hearing Chen Liang's words, Huasu's heart sank. She was about to ask what was going on when she raised her head and saw a servant coming in bringing tea. She stopped asking and waited for the servant to leave. Huasu raised his hand and said, "Have a cup of tea first." Chen Liang bowed to express his thanks, picked up the cup and drank a few sips, finishing the tea in the cup. Chen Song frowned slightly and asked, "Didn't I tell you to stare at Mr. Zhu? Why did you come back to Beijing?" Huasu then asked, "Yes, why did you come back to Beijing?" Chen Liang bowed to the two of them and replied, "The younger one followed Mr. Zhu from Fuyang to Jiangnan East Road until Mr. Zhu left Xishan. The younger one felt that the matter was unusual and decided to return to Beijing and report to the adults in person." Huasu looked at Chen Song nervously and urged, "What's the matter? Please tell me carefully." Chen Liang leaned forward and said, "Your Excellency, Mr. Zhu left Fuyang this time, bringing 8 people with him: Wang Qin, Lu Guang, Ruan Si, Ruan Wu, Mi Chen, Deng Lin, Han Shi, and Mi Qin." Huasu waved her hands impatiently, "I know these, let's get to the point." Chen Liang looked at Chen Song, who nodded towards him. Chen Liang went on to say, "Mr. Zhu led everyone, and there was nothing unusual at first until they arrived in Xishan. Mr. Zhu led people into a shop that sells huangji bean curd rice in Xishan." Huasu sat upright with a gloomy face. She looked at Chen Liang alertly and asked, "What's so special about this shop?" Chen Liang leaned forward and said, "I saw Huajia and Suji in huangji." Huasu stood up from the chair in shock and asked, "Who did you say you saw?" "Huajia and Suji." Chen Liang looked up at Huasu and said with certainty, "Exactly, Huajia and Suji. Now Huajia has changed his name to Huang Xiao, and Suji has changed his name to Su Min." Huasu slapped her hands heavily on the table. "It turns out he hid in Xishan. The old guy has always been in contact with the two of them. Someone is coming." Chen Song quickly stood up and held up his hands to stop him. "Sir, please calm down." Huasu turned to look at Chen Song and asked angrily, "Calm down my anger? How do you want me to calm down? You don't have to plead for them. If you can let them live 10 more years, it will be an advantage for them." Chen Liang looked at Huasu and then at Chen Song. "Young man, I still have something to report." "What's the matter?" Huasu and Chen Song turned to look at Chen Liang and asked at the same time. "Veteran Zhu Lu Guang, Wang Qin, Ruan Wu, and Mi Chen stayed in Xishan. Wang Qin is now the shopkeeper of Suxan Rouge shop in Xishan," Chen Liang continued. Huasu looked at Chen Song and asked, "What does this old guy want to do?" Chen Song shook his head and uttered 2 words, "I don't know." Huasu left the desk, walked to the window, and looked at the courtyard through the window. After a while, he turned around and asked, "Is the dragon mark order in Huajia's hands?" Chen Song shook his head and denied, "It's impossible. Huajia was not in the capital when the incident happened." Huasu asked, "Where is Suji? Is it possible for Wan to let him leave the capital with the dragon pattern order?" Chen Song shook his head again, "It's impossible. Suji was only a teenager when the incident happened. Moreover, Suji was not working in Hua Mansion and had been living in Su Mansion. Hua Mansion suddenly suffered a disaster, and Wan didn't have time to hand over the dragon mark order to Suji." Chen Song's words made Huasu's doubts disappear a lot, and he felt much more at ease. "Huajia and Suji cannot be left here and must be removed as soon as possible. Take some people with you and go with Chen Liang. Remember to deal with them thoroughly," Huasu ordered Deng Jiao. Deng Jiao looked at Chen Song, who nodded, "Go and bring more people. We really can't keep these 2 people." Deng Jiao leaned forward to accept the order and exited the study together with Chen Liang. After the two left, Huasu said, "Why did the old man suddenly go to Shishan? It is most likely related to the Dragon Mark order." Chen Song picked up the cup and sipped the tea, put down the teacup, and said slowly, "So what if the dragon-marked order appears? The palace changes that year pushed the Long Shadow Guard from darkness to the light, and you are the leader of the Long Shadow Guard appointed by the Emperor. It has been 10 years, and the Long Shadow Guard is no longer the same as it used to be. Those who are disobedient are either dead or old. The real power is already in your hands, so you have nothing to worry about." Chen Song's words calmed Huasu's mind. Huasu sat down and said while pouring tea, "You are right. At this moment, the Dragon Shadow Guard is no longer the Dragon Shadow Guard it used to be, so there is nothing to worry about. However, the dragon-marked order still has to be found, and I want to make those old guys bow their heads. By the way, in a few days, it will be Shue'er's hairpin ceremony. After Shue'er gets her hair, we should finalize the marriage of our two children." Chen Song looked at Huasu and asked with a half-smile, "Has the head of the family discussed this matter with his wife and Wenda? Are they willing?" Huasu saw that Chen Song's smile was not even close to his eyes, and he heard something in Chen Song's words, so he asked, "What? You still don't believe me?" Chen Song played with the cup in his hand, smiled dryly, and said, "How can I not believe you, sir? However, a few days ago, when Mr. Cai and his wife were having a banquet at Prime Minister Jiang's mansion, they heard his wife talk about Wenda's marriage. Ms. Cai said that her wife was optimistic about Zhang Xinyuan, the sixth sister of the Zhang mansion, and planned to invite Mrs. Li from the British Duke's family to the Zhang mansion to find out more about her. Doesn't the head of the family know about this?" Huasu's face turned green and white. He cursed Mrs. Lu secretly in his heart and said in embarrassment, "Ms. Lu has never mentioned it to me. I really don't know about this matter." "Don't worry, Chen Song. I'll tell Lu Shi later. Let's talk about it." Chen Song nodded slightly and said, "It is better for children to marry with two surnames. Your Excellency, you should discuss it with your wife. Let's make plans again." After saying that, Chen Song stood up and bowed to Huasu to say goodbye. "I still have something to do, so I'll take my leave first." Huasu then stood up and assured Chen Song, "Don't worry, Huasu, am not a treacherous person. We had an agreement back then, and I will definitely abide by it." Chen Song stopped and replied with a smile, "I trust you, sir. I'll take my leave." After Chen Song left, Huasu Yang shouted, "Here comes someone." The servant came in and said, "Sir, what are your orders?" Huasu asked in a deep voice, "Is Madam in the house?" The servant noticed his master's anger and lowered his head nervously to reduce his presence. "Sir, my wife has not gone out. She is in the backyard at the moment." Huasu walked towards the backyard, walking hurriedly along the way. The servants along the way saw her and hurriedly moved to the side and bowed to bow. Huasu passed through the moon gate, entered the backyard of the commander's mansion, and went straight to Liu's Xianglan garden. Mrs. Liu was patrolling the backyard with her maid and her mother-in-law. Huasu jumped out of the way and stood on the corridor and shouted at the maid who was cleaning, "Tell madam to come see me quickly." The maid bent her knees in fear, took 2 steps back, turned around and hurriedly left Xianglan garden. After a cup of tea, Mrs. Liu returned to Xianglan garden with her personal maid. "Master, are you looking for a concubine?" Liu asked breathlessly. Huasu looked at the maid behind Mrs. Liu. Mrs. Liu waved her hand knowingly, and the maid and mother-in-law retreated out of the house knowingly. "Master, you look very bad. What happened?" After the servant stepped back, Mrs. Liu asked. Huasu knocked on the table with his hand, stared at Liu and said, "What's the matter? What's going on with Wenda's marriage? Why don't you discuss it with me?" Seeing Hwasu asking about her son's marriage, Mrs. Lu felt relieved and said with a smile, "So that's what happened. I haven't even told the story yet, so I didn't tell the master. I plan to have some clues. Let's discuss it with the master." Hwasu said solemnly, "What are you discussing?" "I have other plans for Wenda's marriage, so don't interfere." Hwasu's words angered Mrs. Lu. Mrs. Lu blurted out, "Master, I have other plans." "What plan?" "Master's plan is to let Brother Ming marry the daughter of a domestic servant. Master doesn't think about Brother Ming, but I, as a mother, have to think about my son. Have you ever thought about it? If you let Mr. Ming marry the daughter of a domestic servant, what face will Brother Ming have in the future? How can you and I face each other? Besides, Brother Ming's future is gone?" Hwasu asked back, "Let's talk about Wenda's marriage. What future do you propose?" Lu Shi chuckled and said, "I have martial arts skills and can take on the role of commander of the Dragon Shadow Guard." "Where is Brother Ming?" "Brother Ming's martial arts skills are average. In the future, the Emperor will let a person with average martial arts skills be the commander? Brother Ming can't follow the position of the master to dominate the Dragon Shadow Guard. Where is the future of my brother? Have you ever thought about this?" Hwasu felt a little guilty after being hit by Mrs. Lu, but her face remained tough. "What do you know about women's opinions?" Lu didn't give in and said bluntly, "I don't understand. I know best. What I understand is to let my son marry the daughter of a domestic servant." Hwasu slapped her palm on the table, pointed at Mrs. Lu and said, "Don't say house servant's daughter on the left and house servant's daughter on the right. At that time, if Chen Song had not helped me, would I have achieved everything I have today? As a person, you have to have some conscience and keep your word, right?" Mrs. Lu sneered and said, "Isn't this master confused? Shouldn't it be with the help of my mother's family that I got everything I have today? If it weren't for the help of everyone in my natal family, how could I have been able to take the position of commander of the Long Shadow Guard with just one servant?" Hwasu was unable to answer the question from Mrs. Lu. She slapped the table angrily and said, "Okay, you have a point. But you can't let me break my trust." Lu poured a cup of tea and handed it to Hwasu, then said in a slow voice, "Master, take a sip of tea." Hwasu glanced at Mrs. Lu, who smiled at him and stretched her hand forward. Hwasu reached out to take the teacup, lowered his head and took a sip of tea, and said, "You also know that the affairs of the Long Shadow Guard depend entirely on Chen Song's help. Otherwise, how can I secure my position as commander? Your chief servant is called Chen Song, and the short servant is called Chen Song. Chen Song has long since left his humble status. He is now my staff, not a domestic servant." Hwasu put down the cup, and Mrs. Lu refilled her tea while saying, "Although the staff and servants are about the same, I will pay attention to them in the future." Hwasu sighed, "How can it be as simple as you said? The relationships within Longjingwei are intricate and complex, and cannot be explained clearly in a few words. Chen Song, I can't offend you yet. So, dear Wenda." Before Hwasu could finish, Mrs. Lu interrupted her, "Master, I will listen to you on other matters, but I will never give in on Brother Ming's marriage." Hwasu glared at Mrs. Lu and said angrily, "What do you think we should do? I tell you, Chen Song cannot be offended." Lu blurted out, "I don't care what happens to Chen Song. I only care about Brother Ming's marriage and Brother Ming's future. I don't have only one son. I can let your other sons marry Chen Shuer." Hwasu leaned on the chair, looked at the carvings on the wall and said, "How can this be the same? The other sons are not legitimate sons." Lu Shi looked at Hwasu with a sad face and felt extremely bored. Lu suppressed the dissatisfaction in her heart and gently advised, "I know that I am a man who values affection and righteousness and keeps his word. This is also where I respect the master very much. Who wouldn't say good things about the master's treatment of Chen Song? If anything good happens, the master will first think of Chen Song. If there is something dangerous, the master will be most worried about Chen Song. Brothers from the same mother may not be as meticulous as the master. After hearing Liu's words, Huasu's expression softened a lot, and he sat upright and said, Chen Song treats me very well, and I feel like brothers with him. Because of this, I want Wenda to marry Shuer. Lu wanted Huasu to understand that he had given Chen Song enough and Chen Song should be satisfied, but she didn't want Huasu to get the wrong idea. Lu Shi said hurriedly, Sir, Brother Ming's marriage will affect him for life, and it will also affect our status in the capital. We must be careful. Huasu rubbed his face with a headache. Of course I know these serious connections. Chen Song sighed. Alas, if you want to blame it, it's just that I was too hasty back then and spoke too fully, so I'm so passive today. Lu asked curiously, what promise did the master make for him? Huasu waved his hand and said, you are a woman who doesn't understand these things, so you don't need to ask any more questions. Wenda's marriage must be subject to my instructions, and you can't interfere with it. How could Mrs. Lu compromise when it was about her precious son? She argued with reason, for other matters, whatever I say will be whatever I say, and I won't say much about my concubine. It concerns Brother Ming's life, and I can't agree to my request to redeem my concubine. You. Huasu raised his hand and pointed at Lu angrily. Lu took a deep breath, stabilized her mind, and said solemnly, Master, Brother Ming's marriage is not something you and I can decide. What do you mean? Huasu asked, staring at Lu. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Rebirth of Space, the lucky girl from a farm family. Author, he would fire every. Chapter 139. Chapter 139 Assassination. Lu Shi poured herself a cup of tea, took a sip, looked up at Huasu, and said calmly, Master, there is a dragon shadow guard behind you. Would they leave Mingir's marriage affairs alone? The master doesn't really think that the sixth lady of Wang Xiang's family is the concubine's favorite, right? Huasu fell back into the group chair, stared blankly ahead, and didn't speak for a long time. After a while, Mrs. Lu broke the silence first. If the master is in trouble, I have an idea. Huasu turned to look at Lu, waiting for her to continue. Lu Shi said, I can record Brother Jun in my name, give Brother Jun the status of his legitimate son, and let Brother Jun marry Chen Shui. Huasu straightened up and asked, what are your conditions? Lu Shi said, the position of commander of Lunjing Guard must be passed on to Brother Ming. Brother Jun will assist Brother Ming for the rest of his life. Huasu thought for a while, nodded and said, this is a good idea. Let me think about it again. I have something else to do, so I'll leave first. After Huasu left, Mrs. Lu said to the eldest maid Bankin, go to the British Duke's mansion, give this post to your cousin, and ask her to go to the Guanyin temple to offer incense tomorrow morning. Bankin bowed his knees and went to the British government with Liu's post in hand. Liu's family name is Lu Zian, and she is the concubine of Lu Hongsheng, the young minister of Taikang Temple. His aunt Lu Hongli was the wife of Li Yunzhen, the minister of Taifu Temple. Lu Hongli's daughter Li Yuhui was the wife of Lu Dingning, the British duke. Lu Hongsheng and Lu Hongli are siblings from the same mother. When Lu Zian was young, she was often abused by her aunt. Lu Hongli sympathized with Lu Zian and often took her to live in his house. Therefore, Lu Zian has been friends with Li Yuhui since childhood. The marriage between Lu and Huasu was facilitated by Li Yuhui. Lu Zian respects Li Yuhui very much and always looks to Li Yuhui for advice when encountering problems. Hong Cheng, in the following days, Gu Huayu went to Zhuangzi every day. On this day, Gu Huayu had just returned to the city when Xiao Yang came over and reported, "Miss, the second young master Li came over again today with his retinue." "Oh, did he want to see me for anything?" Gu Huayu raised her head and asked. Xiao Yang leaned forward and said, "I said I came to say goodbye to the lady. Seeing that the lady is not there, I asked her when she will return. The servant doesn't know the time when the young lady will come back, so she can't go back to Mr. Li. Mr. Li said he would come back to look for the lady later, and then left with his entourage." Gu Huayu nodded, "I understand." In the evening, Li Tao came to the door again with his followers. When Gu Huayu received Qing Yu's report, she was leaning on the soft couch and thinking wildly. Gu Huayu asked, "Where is the person?" Qing Yu said, "Go back to the girl, we are in the living room. The shopkeeper has not come back yet, and Aunt Wang is accompanying the guests in the living room." "I know, let's go." Gu Huayu stood up and walked to the living room. When Li Tao saw Gu Huayu come in, he immediately jumped up from his chair and scolded, "Hey, Gu Xiao, what are you busy with all day long? I can't always find you." "I'm busy shopping, what do you want from me?" Gu Huayu asked. Li Tao sat down next to Gu Huayu. "Hey, you go shopping every day without taking me with you? Isn't it interesting enough?" Gu Huayu curled her lips and said in disgust, "A girl is going to a shop that sells rouge, gouache, bead rings and hairpins. What's the deal with a man like you?" Li Tao said unconvinced, "Why can't my husband visit these places? I also went shopping when I was in the capital." Li Tao suddenly stopped when he said this. Gu Huayu raised her eyebrows and said, "Say, why don't you say it?" Li Tao once visited the Silver Building with Huaruiming and Lu Zixun. Accompany Huaruiming to buy a face for the young Warren of Kunfang House. How can you say this to Gu Huayu? Li Tao waved his hand and said, "There is nothing to say. By the way, I came to see you today to say goodbye to you. You said that day that you would go to the capital in the future. Right?" Gu Huayu nodded, "Yes, I will go. But not now, I have to live some time." Li Tao took out a jade pendant from his purse and handed it to Gu Huayu, "Take this. If you come to the capital, take the jade pendant to the Li mansion in Baikang Gate and find me. Everyone is given a jade pendant. Is it popular nowadays to give jade as a gift?" Gu Huayu looked at the jade pendant in Li Zhan's hand, wondering whether to take it or not. "What are you doing standing around? Take it. If you come to the capital, I will take you to eat delicious food." "How about that?" Li Tao urged when he saw that Gu Hua was still. Gu Huayu hesitated, then reached out to take the jade pendant. "Okay, I'll accept it." Li Tao smiled and said, "That's how you behave. Okay, I'm leaving. We'll see you later." "Hey, Gu Xiao, what you told me is true, right? You will come to the capital, right?" At the end, Li Tao asked again worriedly. Gu Huayu nodded, "Yes, I will." "That's okay, we'll meet later." Li Tao cupped his hands and said. Gu Huayu said happily, "See you soon. I wish you a smooth journey." Gu Huayu sent Li Tao to the gate and watched him ride away before returning to the courtyard. Gu Huayu and his party stayed in Hongcheng for more than a month. At the beginning of the 12th lunar month, they straightened out Zhuangzi's affairs before deciding to return to Xishan. Gu Qinglin and Qing Yu stayed behind to continue taking care of Zhuangzi, and all the maids and wives stayed behind. There was no stopping along the way back, and it took about 10 days to arrive at Xishan. As soon as the boat docked, Husan ran over excitedly and waved to the people on the boat, "Boss, you can come back." King Zhu glanced at Husan with disgust and said to Gu Huayu, "Girl, this person is like a fool and has no eyesight." Gu Huayu smiled and did not answer. Wang Qin reached out to support Gu Huayu, "Girl, let's go down." Husan put up the planks, bowed, and said, "Boss, please." Gu Huayu got off the boat, looked at the busy people at the pier and asked, "Are you busy here? Where are my father and the others?" Husan bowed and responded, "Back to the boss, Mr. Gu is in the city today and has not come over. Let me keep an eye on you." Gu Huayu nodded and asked, "Is everything going well?" "It's fine here at the pier, but not so good at Huangji's in the middle of the night. It's said that many men in black came and many guys were injured," Husan replied. Gu Huayu and shopkeeper Huang looked at each other quickly and said, "Get the car ready and go back to the city." Husan bowed and responded, "Yes, I'll prepare the car now." Shopkeeper Huang then ordered, "King Zhu, go check it out." King Zhu bowed down and turned to leave. Wang Qin saw Husan pulling the carriage and said, "Let's get in the carriage first." Shopkeeper Huang took the reins from Husan's hand. Before getting on the car, Gu Huayu told Husan, "Let someone help unload the goods first. You should keep an eye on this side of the dock." "Don't worry, boss, I understand," little one Husan bowed and responded. On the way back to the city, Gu Huayu fell into deep thought. In her last life, she had never left Shangtai village until her death, and she did not know Huang Xiao's existence, so she had no way of knowing what they had experienced in that life. "Girl, I'm afraid the second master is taking action," shopkeeper Huang said after a while driving the car. "Yeah," Gu Huayu responded. Wang Qin took over the words, "It's not surprising, the second master has sent people to keep an eye on a few old priests. This time Zhu Lao is traveling, the capital must have received a letter, so there will be this assassination." Gu Huayu asked in confusion, "The old priest at the old house is not under the control of the capital?" Shopkeeper Huang replied, "The people in the old house only obey orders from the head of the house. And the head of the house is the one who holds the dragon-marked order. This is also the reason why the second master has been in charge of Longjingwei for 10 years but has been unable to intervene in the affairs of the old house." Wang Qin suddenly thought of something, "By the way, if someone in the capital knows about the girl's existence, I'm afraid." Gu Huayu said calmly, "It doesn't matter, the soldiers will come to stop it. There is nothing to worry about. I originally wanted to hibernate for a few years and proceed step by step according to the plan. Now that they are coming to your door, act accordingly and adapt to circumstances. The girl is here." Shopkeeper Huang parked the car in the yard and turned around and said. When the waiter saw shopkeeper Huang, he shouted happily, "The shopkeeper is back." Fugui heard the sound and hurried out to greet him. Gu Huayu jumped out of the car and walked into the house while asking Fugui who came out, "Where is Sumin?" Fugui hurriedly leaned over and said, "Go back to my lady, the second shopkeeper is in his room." Gu Huayu ordered Chuntang who was coming over, "Go to Lanchi to get my medical box and bring it to Sumin's house." Chuntang nodded repeatedly and said, "Okay, I'll go right away." Gu Huayu went upstairs to Sumin's room. There were many people standing in Sumin's room. Gu Changjiang saw Gu Huayu first and shouted happily, "Xiao is back." Everyone in the room turned their heads to look over. Gu Huayu nodded to everyone and said softly to Wang Qin, "Let everyone get out and don't block the room." Wang Qin understood and raised his voice, "The injured needs to rest, let's get out first." Shopkeeper Huang came in later. After listening to Wang Qin's words, he knew what Gu Huayu meant, "We can't help here, so we should leave first." Everyone retreated, and Chuntang came in carrying a medical box. Chuntang put the medical box on the table and reported to Gu Huayu, "Yinchi invited Dr. Wang from across the street to see him. Dr. Wang said that shopkeeper Sui'er's injury was too serious and asked us to be prepared." Gu Huayu stepped forward to check Su Min's wound and said, "Go and prepare some hot water. Use a pot without oil to heat it. Let it boil and let it cool. Tell Uncle Huang, don't let anyone come in and attack me." Chuntang bent his knees in response, turned around and went out. Gu Huayu took out a pill from the space and gave it to Su Min to take, and then began to treat the wound. In the room next door, Lu Guang reported to shopkeeper Huang, last night, around the second quarter of the Zhou lunar month, about 20 men in black came down from the roof and killed everyone by surprise. Fortunately, shopkeeper Shen of Chang'an restaurant brought people to help. Later, Inspector Lu came over with his servants, and the men in black retreated. Shopkeeper Huang listened silently and asked, "Have you found out the origin?" Lu Guang lowered his voice and said, "The leader holding Shihua should be Chen Liang. The other should be Deng Jiao. The rest, judging by their skills, are all at the level of Xiancheng. Chen Liang is good at swordsmanship, and Shihua is his sword. The people of the Long Shadow Guard are divided into 4 levels, Yuebai, Snowqing, Xianzhi, and Xiancheng. Xianqing is a top expert." Shopkeeper Huang sneered and said, "Let Chen Liang and Deng Jiao come over at the same time. Chen Song can't be bothered. How many casualties do we have?" Lu Guang replied, 3 guys were killed, 7 or 8 were seriously injured, and a few were slightly injured. The doctor has seen them all." Shopkeeper Huang said, "I understand, you go back and rest first. They didn't succeed last night, and they will come again tonight. Only after you rest can you have the strength to fight." Lu Guang nodded, "Okay, I'll take my leave." Shopkeeper Huang followed Lu Guang out, looked at Su Min's room, and asked, "The girl hasn't come out yet?" Wang Qin shook his head, "Not yet." Shopkeeper Huang glanced at the closed room and said, "You wait here. When the girl comes out, tell her that I will go to the yamen." Wang Qin nodded in agreement, "Okay, I understand." Shopkeeper Huang came back from the yamen and saw Wang Qin still waiting outside the door. "Miss, haven't you come out yet?" Wang Qin shook his head. Shopkeeper Huang looked at the house worriedly and guarded the door with Wang Qin. Wang Qin was about to ask about the situation at the yamen when the door opened from the inside. Shopkeeper Huang stepped forward to greet her. "Girl, how is Su Min?" "Don't worry, there's no need to worry about your life," Gu Huayu replied tiredly. Shopkeeper Huang breathed a heavy sigh of relief. Seeing Gu Huayu's face pale, he said, "Girl, I'm tired. Let's go and have a rest. If you have anything else, we can discuss it later, okay?" Gu Huayu shook her head, "It's okay, I can hold on." "Where are the other injured?" "I'll go take a look." Shopkeeper Huang turned to look at Fugui. Fugui took a step forward and said, "Girl, follow the younger one." Gu Huayu looked at the few people watching and ordered, "You guys go down and have a rest first, as long as Aunt Wang is guarding here." Junja and the others bowed to express their thanks and retreated. Gu Huayu followed Fugui downstairs, shopkeeper Huang following beside him. Fugui said as he walked, a total of 13 people were injured, 8 of them were seriously injured, and shopkeeper Su'er was the most seriously injured. Gu Huayu followed Fugui into the room downstairs. The room was filled with the smell of blood and herbs, which made people feel sick. Gu Huayu looked at the wooden beds lined up in a row, frowned, and said, "Open the window. Moreover, clear out the rooms next door and move some of the people there, so that 2 to 3 people can be placed in each room." Shopkeeper Huang turned around and ordered, "Hurry up and do as the girl tells you." After a while, the people in the room were assigned to other rooms. After checking them one by one, Gu Huayu gave each person an anti-inflammatory pill. He said to shopkeeper Huang, "It's nothing serious. He will recover after a few days." Shopkeeper Huang nodded and said, "Thank you, girl. I see that the girl is very tired. She should go and have a rest first, okay?" Gu Huayu knew that there was a tough battle to be fought next, and it was very important to be energetic. So he nodded, "Okay, wake me up in an hour." Shopkeeper Huang bowed and stepped down. Gu Huayu returned to the orchid room, immediately entered the space, went directly to the storage room, opened the top row of drawers on the left, and took out the 2 pieces of cartilage from the cabinet. She made this for a tong before, using modern purification methods. She made a box for a tong and kept the remaining two for herself. Judging from everyone's injuries, the person who came was not only evil, but also very powerful. She had to make some preparations in case something unexpected happened. Gu Huayu put the cartilage powder and antidote together into the brocade bag, then opened the third drawer in the second column on the right, took out a box of silver needles and put it into the brocade bag. Gu Huayu turned around and left the storage room, entered the trading hall, and collected the message Qin Feng left for her and the elixir left behind. End of this chapter. The Rebirth of Space, the lucky girl from a farm family. Author, he would fire every. Chapter 140. Chapter 140 Assassination 2. Gu Huayu checked the elixir. Although it was not as good as the resurrection pill, it was definitely a superior elixir that could strengthen the body and cultivate the body. Now is the time of great need. Gu Huayu thanked her silently, accepted the elixir, and was about to leave when a strange voice came. "Hey, little girl, why are you leaving right now?" Gu Huayu stopped, turned around and looked over, and saw a man in a suit and leather shoes appearing in the illusion mirror. When Gu Huayu saw the strange man, she immediately understood that her space had been upgraded. She still hasn't figured out how the space is upgraded. It seems that after some time, the storage capacity of the space will increase. The same goes for people. She first met a Tong in the space, followed by Qin Feng. The person in front of her should be the third person she met. Gu Huayu leaned towards the man and said, "Hello, I am Hua Yan Ran. What is your name?" The man nodded slightly and said, "Hello, my name is Luo Heiran. I came to the year 3000 AD. Gu Huayu understood clearly that this person came from the future world. If she has free time, Gu Huayu will have a good chat with him. But at this time, Gu Huayu was worried that something might happen to the shop, so she had no intention of chatting. Then he said apologetically, "Hello, I'm sorry, I'm in an emergency, so I came into the space to get something. Let's talk another day. By the way, my information is in the file bag. You can look through it by yourself." Before Luo Heiran could speak again, Gu Huayu had already left the space. Gu Huayu put away the cartilage powder, took out the silver needle and immersed it in the anesthetic. After a quarter of an hour, take out the silver needle and install it. Gu Huayu packed everything up and fell asleep. An hour later, Wang Qin knocked on the door and said, "Girl." Gu Huayu opened her eyes and sat up, "Come in." Wang Qin opened the door and came in, walked to the dressing table and combed Gu Huayu's hair. "Girl, shopkeeper Shen from Chang'an restaurant is here and is talking to shopkeeper Huang in the study. Shopkeeper Huang asked me to come down and report to the girl." Gu Huayu was not surprised, and nodded, "I understand." Shopkeeper Huang said that Aunt Wang is good at hidden weapons. Gu Huayu responded, looked at Wang Qin in the mirror and asked another question. Wang Qin smiled modestly, "It's okay. My master Lu Yiyi is famous for his light skills and hidden weapons. I am my only disciple. However, I am stupid. My master once said that I only learned 7 points." Gu Huayu asked curiously, "Lu Nuxia is also a member of the Dragon Shadow Guard? So where is she now?" Wang Qin said, "Yes, the master was from the same school as the old patriarch and the old lady. He was their junior sister and later joined the Lunjing Guard. Unfortunately, after the old patriarch and the old lady passed away, the master went to wander around. I haven't seen the master again. Girl, your hair is done." Gu Huayu looked at herself in the mirror, stood up, took out a silver needle from the medical box on the table and handed it to Wang Qin. "Here, you take this. The needle is coated with anesthetic. If you get the needle, count 3 times will fall to the ground." Wang Qin happily accepted it. "This is good, thank you, girl." Wang Qin put away the silver needle, suddenly thought of something, and asked, "A girl knows how to use concealed weapons?" Gu Huayu replied truthfully, "Yes." "Really? Let's discuss it someday," Wang Qin asked happily. Gu Huayu stopped, looked back at Wang Qin and said with a smile, "Okay, but you may not win me." Wang Qin rarely sees Gu Huayu praise herself once. He raised his eyebrows and said, "Hey. The girl is not modest at all." Gu Huayu smiled and said seriously, "Others, I may not be as good as you. Hidden weapons are my strength, because I know medical skills and am familiar with the acupuncture points of the human body." Wang Qin nodded with conviction, "That's right." Gu Huayu went to the study. "Uncle Huang, are you looking for me?" When shopkeeper Huang saw Gu Huayu coming in, he stood up and came over to greet her. "Miss Xiao is here." Shopkeeper Shen stood up and bowed to Gu Huayu with a smile. "Hello, Miss Xiao." Shopkeeper Huang recommended, "Girl, this is shopkeeper Shen from Chang'an Restaurant. Gu Huayu repays the gift with blessings." The two parties exchanged pleasantries for a while, and Gu Huayu sat down next to shopkeeper Huang. Shopkeeper Huang said, "This time, thank you to shopkeeper Shen for lending a helping hand and allowing Huang Ji to escape." Shopkeeper Shen leaned forward and said bluntly, "Brother Huang, you're welcome, we neighbors should help each other. What's more, when Mr. Lu left, he told me that Huang Ji's matter is the matter of Chang'an Restaurant." Gu Huayu leaned forward and said, "Thank you, shopkeeper Shen, and thank you, brother Qinjian." Shopkeeper Shen bowed and said jokingly, "Thank you, no need. When Miss Xiao sees Lu Ye, remember to praise him in front of him." Gu Huayu's heart moved and she said with a smile, "It's easy to talk, but I still have something to trouble shopkeeper Shen." After communicating with shopkeeper Shen, Gu Huayu thought about it and made a decision quickly. Since the other party offered to help, he accepted it gladly. It was regarded as a favor owed to Lu Zikan, and he would try to repay it later. Shopkeeper Shen said, "It's not a problem, it's just the girl's order." Gu Huayu said, "I want to transfer a few injured people to Chang'an Restaurant and let them rest there for a few days. I wonder if it's convenient for shopkeeper Shen." After hearing this, shopkeeper Shen did not hesitate to call the bodyguard and said, "No problem, I promise the girl that Shen will do his best to protect Huang Ji's brothers and not let them lose a hair." Gu Huayu leaned forward and said, "Thank you, shopkeeper Shen." Shopkeeper Shen hurriedly stepped aside to avoid Gu Huayu's courtesy. "Young lady, you can't do that. She is our sixth master's savior and the great benefactor of our Chang'an Restaurant. If the girl is in trouble, how can we, the Chang'an Restaurant, just stand by and watch?" Gu Huayu stood up and bowed solemnly to shopkeeper Shen. Shopkeeper Shen quickly stopped her. "Girl." Gu Huayu straightened up and said, "Shopkeeper Shen can pretend not to know what happened last night." Shopkeeper Shen's words and deeds make Huayu admire him. Shopkeeper Shen didn't expect that a teenage girl could be so well controlled and flawless in her dealings with others. Shopkeeper Huang smiled and smoothed things over. "They say birds of a feather flock together, people belong to groups, and people who are destined to be together will always come together. Miss Xiao saved Mr. Lu, and now Mr. Liu's people have rescued us. Isn't this fate? Let's stop standing around and being polite, let's sit down and talk." Shopkeeper Shen smiled and sat down. "Brother Huang is right, our two families have a close relationship. A few days ago, I received a letter from above, saying that our restaurant has business dealings with Miss Xiao, and asked me to help Miss Xiao." Gu Huayu said with a smile, "Then Huayu will never give up." After finishing speaking, Gu Huayu turned to look at shopkeeper Huang. "Uncle Huang, send all the injured brothers on the first floor to Chang'an Restaurant." Shopkeeper Huang nodded knowingly, bowed to shopkeeper Shen and said, "Thank you for your kindness. Shopkeeper Shen will go back first to make arrangements, and I will send him over later." After shopkeeper Shen stood up to say goodbye, Shopkeeper Huang said to Gu Hua, "Girl, where is shopkeeper Shen?" Gu Huayu understood shopkeeper Wang's worries and said, "Shopkeeper Shen should have gone to Hongcheng to meet brother Qinjian recently. I want to take a gamble." Shopkeeper Huang nodded, "Okay, I'll make arrangements when I go down." Gu Huayu warned, "Be careful, don't let anyone notice." Shopkeeper Huang nodded, "Don't worry, girl, let's go through the tunnel, no one will know." Gu Huayu was not surprised and she nodded and said, "Well, okay, you go make arrangements, be careful." Shopkeeper Huang bowed his hands and said goodbye. Shopkeeper Huang opened the door and went out. He met Gu Dichang at the door and hurriedly greeted him, "Sir, are you looking for me?" Gu Dichang shook his head hurriedly, "Hello, brother Huang, I'm looking for Xiao." Shopkeeper Huang stepped aside and said, "Sir, please, Miss Xiao is in the study." Gu Huayu heard the conversation at the door and came out to greet him, "Dad, you are looking for me." Gu Dichang looked at Gu Huayu, then at Shopkeeper Huang, nodded and said, "Yes." Shopkeeper Huang looked at Gu Dichang and then looked at Gu Huayu worriedly. Gu Huayu gave Shopkeeper Huang a reassuring look and said, "Uncle Huang, go and do your work. I'm here." Shopkeeper Huang bowed to say goodbye. Gu Huayu let Gu Dichang into the house and poured him a cup of tea. "Dad, drink tea." Gu Dichang reached out to take the teacup, took 2 sips from it, and then asked, "Xiao, what are the identities of brother Huang and the others? Why are people chasing them? Why do they obey your orders?" Gu Huayu refilled Gu Dichang's tea and said, "Daddy must have guessed it, right?" Gu Huayu poured the tea, looked up at Gu Dichang, faced Gu Dichang's astonished expression, and then said, "As my father thought, Uncle Huang was my father's former subordinate. When something happened to the Hua family, Uncle Huang was not in the capital. Later, Uncle Huang was hunted down and escaped." Gu Dichang asked in confusion, "Brother Huang, how do you know who you are?" Gu Huayu raised her finger and pointed at her face, "Dad, I forgot, you said I look very much like my father." Gu Dichang patted his head, "Why did I forget this? So, brother Huang has recognized you a long time ago." Gu Huayu nodded, "The first time I followed my father into the city, Uncle Huang recognized him, but he didn't dare to recognize him. That night, Mr. Lu was assassinated, and I came to rescue him. Uncle Huang recognized the Hua family's boxing skills, and that's why he recognized me." Gu Dichang suddenly realized it, nodded and said, "So that's it?" Gu Dichang looked around and asked worriedly, "Does the other party know about you?" Gu Huayu shook her head, "This assassination is aimed at Uncle Huang and Su Mi, and they probably don't know my existence yet. Oh, by the way, Su Min is the younger brother of Su Xin who saved my father back then. No wonder the second shopkeeper Su looks familiar, it turns out he is the younger brother of Su's great benefactor." Gu Dichang rubbed his hands in excitement. "Xiao, how is shopkeeper Su's injury? Is it important?" Gu Huayu said, "I can save my life, but the injury is serious and I need to recover for a while." "That's good. Xiao, what can I do next?" "Huang Ji is not safe. Otherwise, transfer shopkeeper Su Er to Miwen and I will take care of him." "Okay," Gu Dichang asked. Gu Huayu thought for a while and shook her head, "No need for the moment, the other party is staring at Su Mi and it is more dangerous for Su Min to leave Huang Ji. Furthermore, Su Min was seriously injured and should not be moved." "Don't worry, Dad, I will take good care of Su Min. Daddy is staying in Miwen these days. Lu Guang and Ruan Wuhui will protect you in the dark." Gu Dichang asked, "Xiao, who is the other party? Why do you want to kill brother Huang and shopkeeper Su Er?" Gu Huayu replied calmly, "He is from Huasu. Huasu is the adopted son of the Hua family. He is younger than his father and is known as the second master Hua." Gu Dichang was silent for a moment, sighed and nodded, It turns out to be a story about a farmer and a snake, so be careful. Yeah, I know. It's getting late, Dad should go back early, Gu Huayu said. Gu Dichang stood up and said, okay, I'll go back first. You should be careful. Gu Huayu sent Gu Dichang away and returned to the study. Shopkeeper Huang had already returned. Seeing Gu Huayu come back, Shopkeeper Huang leaned over and said, girl, everything has been arranged. Thank you for your hard work. Let's eat first, and then you can go and have a rest and recuperate your energy. I'm afraid it won't be peaceful tonight, Gu Huayu ordered. Shopkeeper Huang nodded and said in a loud voice, here comes someone. When Fugui came in, Shopkeeper Huang ordered, send the food to the study. Wealth and honor exit. Seeing Shopkeeper Huang hesitate to speak, Gu Huayu asked, Uncle Huang, is there something wrong? Shopkeeper Huang thought for a while and said, Ruan Wu said that among the men in black last night, he recognized Deng Jiao and Chen Liang next to Chen Song, and there were about 20 men in black, all of whom were at the Xianqing level. Gu Huayu frowned slightly, pointed to the chair opposite and said, sit down, people at the Xianqing level are very powerful. Shopkeeper Huang followed the instructions and sat across from Gu Huayu. Yes, the people of Lunjing Guard are divided into 4 levels, Yuebai, Sueking, Suanzi and Xianqing. Xianqing is the top master. Gu Huayu said calmly, with so many people dispatched, it seems that Huasu has not been at peace in these years. 10 years have passed, it's time to teach him a lesson. Let's talk about Chen Liang and Deng Jiao, these two are very powerful. Shopkeeper Huang raised his head and looked at Gu Huayu, girl, among the people who followed the head of the family back then, Chen Song had the best kung fu. Deng Jiao and Chen Liang are Chen Song's most capable right-hand men. They have followed Chen Song since they were young, eating and living with Chen Song. Chen Liang is good at swordsmanship and is a superb swordsman with Shihua sword. 10 years ago, he became famous in the world. Deng Jiao is good at boxing, especially his iron sand palm. He was invincible in the ring 10 years ago. As expected, the person who came was evil and powerful. Gu Huayu said with relief, I understand, it's a blessing not a curse, we can just adapt to the situation. Uncle Huang, let's go and have a rest first, I'll go see Su Min. Shopkeeper Huang nodded, I've told Wang Qin that if something critical happens at night, ask her to protect the girl and bring her back to Fuiyang's old house. Gu Huayu said with a smile, Uncle Huang thinks too much, we may not lose. Of course, I know that the opponent is very strong, but we are not weak either. Isn't it? Shopkeeper Huang was very pleased to see that Gu Huayu showed no fear. He nodded and said, that's right. I'm just assuming, just in case. Gu Huayu stood up and interrupted Shopkeeper Huang, nothing is wrong. Uncle Huang is going to have a rest, I'm going to see Su Min. Shopkeeper Huang stood up and followed Gu Huayu out of the study. I'll go with the girl to see Su Min. Gu Huayu turned to look at Shopkeeper Huang and advised, when you encounter a big problem, the more difficult it is, the more calm you have to be. Right. Shopkeeper Huang smiled apologetically, you're right, girl, I'll go and have a rest right now. Gu Huayu leaned on the railing to look at the sky and said, it's getting late. You can only rest for 2 hours at most. Go quickly. End of this chapter.